What's the scariest city you've been to? Story 1. Rizhao, China. Not scary so much like the others, China is insanely safe, but extremely creepy. I felt like I was on a movie set. First off, it's a city of 500,000, but it's built for a population of 10 million. But it's not like those ghost cities out west where there never was anyone. It seemed like it was actually a big city, but everyone just left suddenly. The beaches were well maintained and empty, the buses ran frequently and were empty, the streets were lined with all the usual Chinese stuff and were empty. We went into a breakfast restaurant and the food was great, but we were the only customers and the staff seemed surprised to see us. We asked for directions to the famous fish market, no one there could tell us where it was. It turned out to be about 750 meters away. It was massive and filled with vendors selling huge quantities of incredibly fresh fish. It was mostly empty. Also, almost everything was open until the wee hours of the morning, if not 24 hours. This is unusual even in the biggest Chinese cities, let alone this abandoned town. It was just an unsettling experience all around. This reminds me so much of when my girlfriend and I went to Halong Bay, but we ended up in Halong City. Almost sounds identical to what you're describing. We had people taking pictures of us because no tourists ever went there. Essentially, people who go to Halong Bay go via Hanoi and not Halong City. It felt like an abandoned Call of Duty map for Vegas, the deafening sound of crickets. Yeah, Rizhao is located on the coastline between Qingdao and Shanghai, and is one of the creepiest parts of China. Way underdeveloped, and with no coastal cities in between. It has been an extremely distant and inaccessible city. There are no major train lines to bigger cities, and developments have been way more focused on neighboring Qingdao and the peninsula instead. It finally had some significant changes when the passenger rail between Qingdao and Lianyungang was built in 2020. Therefore, Rizhao has direct access to Shanghai. What you saw there is an early stage of an attempt to develop a city. China finally realized there could be some potential to develop, but this area has been dead for such a long period. It isn't and won't be known to the tourists even though they put a beach there. Same case for Lianyungang, one of the least developed cities in Jiangsu, which even locals wouldn't call a coastal city. Going down the coastline from there, just roughly check it on your maps, and you'll realize how terrifying it is. I had a similar experience on a trip to China a few years ago. We spent some time in Beijing and Shanghai, which felt like normal cities. But then we visited Wuhan and Zhangjiagang, cities of millions of people that nevertheless never expect to see Western tourists, and we visited multiple bars that were completely freaking empty except for us. The staff always looked surprised to see us, and that we were the only customers they served. And in one case, they locked the door behind us when we left. This was at like 7 p.m. One night, we got tired of these weird bars and just tried to buy some wine, and this liquor store looked like it had been hastily built just for us. Huge and insanely nice except for one corner, which was dim and abandoned. And again, we were the only customers there. Such a strange place. Story 2. Port-au-Prince. Saw a newly shot woman on the sidewalk, and the next day a human finger in a trash heap. Holy crap, I came here to say the exact same thing. I went there for earthquake relief in 2010, and we were escorted everywhere by armed guards and weren't allowed to walk anywhere. We could only travel by car. We were there 10 weeks after the earthquake, and at night they would put the bodies in a huge pile and burn them. We all came home with horrible upper respiratory infections because of it. They were also everywhere in the streets. Some of the medical stuff we dealt with I can't even mention here, and the saddest thing is it's gotten 10 times worse in the years since. I get emotional just thinking about it. I knew a woman who went to Haiti for volunteer disaster relief, if I remember correctly. It was the 2010 earthquake and hurricane. When she arrived, she said it was complete chaos, and somehow ended up at a local hospital. Once there, people started bringing her injured persons asking her what to do. She was not a medical provider of any kind, but there was no hospital staff or anyone with medical experience available either. She was, however, an environmental lab technician, so was aware of basic medical protocols and was certified in first aid. She said she ended up suturing quite a few cuts. I'm certified in first aid too, but in the US, we only do first aid as a way to stop further damage, with the expectation that professional medical help will be available soon. I'm not sure what I'd do if I had to help an injured person in a major disaster like that, with a slim likelihood that a medical provider would be available anytime soon. Same. Saw countless bodies on my way to work across several months, blood on the wall and people being murdered right in front of me. Oh, and once they invaded the nearby church during a night prayer, forced someone to beg for their life over the mic before killing him so that the whole neighborhood would hear. Those churches are very noisy, and be scared. Since it still haunts me to this day, that worked well, I would say. I get a lot of immigrants that come to work with me. I like to chat with them, learn about their country, and ask if they'd recommend visiting. One day, I was talking to a guy from Afghanistan and a fella from Haiti. I asked them if I should visit their countries. The Afghan chuckled and said, "No, it would not be nice for someone like you right now. I'm blindingly white." The Haitian got super somber and said, "No, it would not be nice for anyone." My family decided to go to Haiti after the earthquake in 2010 to help with humanitarian aid. I was a scrawny, white, blonde high school girl, and we stuck out like a sore thumb. In the week we were there, I was shot at while sleeping on a veranda. Brought away by a group of men telling me I could get married to one of them. Thank God my dad was paying attention. Saw a woman get shot on the street and watched a woman give birth on the side of the road. I also had a bunch of other wonderful experiences as well, so it wasn't all bad, but it was dangerous and chaotic in a way I haven't experienced since. Story 3. Juarez, Mexico. I'm an Irish Mexican, redhead. Went with cousins to see my aunt and uncle. At the time, in '07, it was the most murderous city on earth. My family members were in a cartel. There was a cartel war going on. Had armed men all around at all times. For all the money, cars, and opulence at their home, it was like being in prison. The tension in the air was thick. I was treated like a king, but that whole week I was terrified inside. Different world. Was told no matter what happens, do not call the police. They worked for the other guys. I was told that if it kicked off and anyone made it through the gates, I had to grab a gun and shoot myself. That would have been the best possible outcome. I haven't been back. This journalist did a story on Juarez around that time. He followed the homicide detective around. They got a call for a murder on the road, a hit on a car. One person was killed and left lying in the street, the other on their way to the hospital in an ambulance. Then they got another call, another homicide down the street. It was an ambulance. They finished the job. When they get back to the forensics lab, they have something like 20 bodies from that day alone. I can see this is very shocking to you, but this is just a normal day. Tomorrow there will be 20 more murders, and no chance to solve any of the murders. It was seriously horrifying. I actually had dinner at a huge Mexican place in El Paso back in 2012. It was weird because half the people most likely lived across the border in a war zone. But everyone was having fun, eating dinner, celebrating quinceañera, etc. I was there with my family as tourists in '04 or '05. We were blissfully unaware of how dangerous it was at the time. This was in the timeline of all the local women disappearing, which I think was eventually linked back to a politician's son. Had a super delish lunch for like 100 pesos or some ridiculously small amount of money. My 18-month-old son tried limes for the first time. The mall was clean, hopelessly behind the times, with a super out-of-place ice skating rink that nobody was using. A man in the local market followed me yelling, "You're cheap!" at me because I didn't buy his Rolex knockoff for $50. Good times. They usually don't mess with tourists. But being in a family with the same surname would be immediate death. I thought I was a tough guy back then, but when you have dudes with AKs and 50 cals all around all the time, a whole new level of stress kicks in. Was also the last time I did any drugs, too. When you see in person that every gram has blood shed for it, it kinda ruins the fun. Plus 90% plus purity coke right off a brick is a different ballgame. Horrible things happen every day so junkies can get high. Story 4. The doorman in my hotel in Johannesburg stopped me as I was walking out and told me, "You won't last 5 minutes out there. Go back to your room where it's safe." Was in Joburg in August and it seemed pretty chill to me, but I wasn't walking around dodgy areas at night. We went to the Mall of Africa at night and a market on Sunday and all seemed very normal and calm. Didn't see any violence there at all in the 4 days we were there. But I can imagine that in the wrong areas, it's there. The same goes for the whole of South Africa. Found it very good-natured, saw no violence at all, and never felt threatened. Just my recent experience of the place, though. I'm sure others differ. Super sketchy. But funny enough, Soweto is, or at least was, when I was there, extremely safe. We walked around at night and went to bars and restaurants, and we would get high fives from the locals. Everyone wanted to talk to us, and were incredibly friendly and welcoming. Apparently in Soweto, they depend on tourism so much that if you're caught mugging a tourist, they'll go full mob justice and beat the crap out of the mugger. While I've been in Johannesburg during the same journey, Cape Town is my example. In Johannesburg, it was too dangerous to even bother spending time, so we just took a plane there, rented a car, and got out. But I spent a month in Cape Town without my family before that, in an immersive language program. In the evening, I went back home to the man hosting me on my own, and it was the only time in my life I'd been followed and shouted at by a man waving a big knife around. A guy in a car had to stop and ask me if everything was fine, but honestly, I just used the opportunity to dash to the fenced building complex my host lived in. We also had news almost every day of cops, and even normal people ambushed and killed in or near the city. I also got regularly accosted by prostitutes on the way back in the evening, but that was less scary. Although it could have been because people later told us it can lead to being robbed too, and more off-putting and sad as I was clearly underage. They weren't pushy though, thankfully, mostly asking for chewing gum after I said no thanks, which I had. Visited Joburg on the 23rd and mistakenly went to a restaurant in Yeoville. For those who don't know, it's probably one of the worst, if not the worst neighborhood in an already dangerous city. Probably the most run-down place I have ever been. It didn't seem like it was slums where people were trying to survive, more like it had been destroyed over time by crime and destitution. The driver told me to put my necklace away, and for some reason they were burning things in the street, and I watched someone get robbed at about 6 p.m. Around 7, a motorcade of at least 30-plus police cars came through yelling something over the loudspeakers. Probably the biggest traveling blunder I have made. My friend from work was assigned to a project in Joburg, and he came away with a lot of stories. The client he worked for arranged their housing and security. The place was a huge 5-bedroom house in a sort of walled enclave with armed guards and a huge tall fence around it. The doors to the house were all steel reinforced and would lock automatically so you couldn't leave them open at night by accident. They were also driven to work in a car with a security guard. When he rented his own car after a while, the rental place told him that it's normal not to stop at red lights at night unless the traffic is very heavy for some reason, and that if a car pulls up behind or beside them at night, it's safer just to roll away assuming they mean you harm. The guy also low-key asked him away from the desk if he wanted to be put in touch with someone to get a handgun for protection. He eventually met a girl and started dating. When they went to her parents' house, so he could meet them, they had to explain to the police outside because the neighbors had been robbed by men with machetes in the middle of the night. Story 5. I was in St. Louis with my cousin and we crossed that bridge. East St. Louis has gotta be the most dangerous feeling place I've ever been. Streetlights busted out at night, everything ran down or abandoned, bullet holes in the stop signs, etc. We pulled up GPS and got the hell out of there real quick. I drove around there when I played Pokemon Go around the country one summer. The neighborhoods terrified me even though the city I was from wasn't exactly safe either. Streets with every other home boarded up though, and people looking like they'd kill you in front of the others. My Pokemon stayed in those gyms for months though. I opened these comments to type East St. Louis, then stopped myself thinking, nah, you're just a Midwesterner who hasn't traveled enough around the world yet. Kind of reassuring to hear from others that I wasn't just exaggerating. It really is a good place to go if you want your money, your ride, or your life taken. I mean, I remember being super low on gas and having to stop to fill up, and the guy working came out and said, "Get back in the car," and then kept pumping for me. 3 black SUVs immediately pulled up and he stopped pumping, slapped the side of my car with a double tap to let me know he was done, and I peeled the hell out of there. Came here to say St. Louis. My cousin and I were 20 and 21, both female, and moved from Arizona to Ohio and got lost in St. Louis. The cops actually pulled us over and asked what we were doing in that neighborhood. We told them we were lost and looking for the freeway, and they actually escorted us back to where we needed to be. They were like, "Yeah, y'all can't be out here in this car." Yeah, I grew up near STL. A girl I went to high school with died a few years after graduation in a carjacking. It was really sad because she was freaking out because she had her baby in the back. She was more than willing to hand over everything she had to the gunmen, but she just wanted to get her baby out of the car seat. She was too worked up, and the carjackers, I'm sure, were also too hyped up on adrenaline to listen though, and just shot her dead in the street. thinking she was fighting back or something. Didn't even notice the kid in the back until they were blocks away, where they thankfully just dumped him out on the sidewalk in his car seat unharmed and sped off. I was at a conference in Champaign a few years ago and went to St. Louis to see the Arch. Yes, I'm freaking weird like that, but the Cards used to be my NL team. I ended up sort of lost in East St. Louis despite all my efforts to not. The freeway exits screwed me up. Anyway, GPS got me out safely, and I ended up visiting the zoo and an art gallery that had free admission. Overall, despite getting lost, I enjoyed St. Louis immensely. Story 6. Kingston, Jamaica. I switched hotels to one more secure one. Early on my last morning, I was going to the airport and my original hotel was on fire. I have a permanent scar on my forehead from Kingston, a little reminder of my last visit to Jamaica. People scampered to get on a bus, climbing on each other's backs. An old-fashioned Coke bottle was thrown at the bus and exploded into the crowd. One shard hit me right above the eye. There are no ambulances or police to come to rescue you. Had to walk for a few miles in the heat to the nearest doctor covered in blood. Got stitches, boarded the plane with a bloody patch on my head, fought the urge to kneel down and kiss the carpet at the Philadelphia airport. I spent 2 summers traveling all around Jamaica, working on my master's thesis on Jamaican agriculture and production. It was mostly self-directed, but with guidance from an NGO group. I stayed in a village up in the mountains in the middle of the country, but regularly had to get around the country to interview and survey farms. We attempted to rent a car for the summer, but it was just too risky to drive and not get it stolen, so we took taxis everywhere. Taxis in Jamaica work on routes, not dissimilar from buses, but to get any distance you have to hop in and out of taxis in every single town. The only way to get to Kingston was to transfer through Spanish Town. Spanish Town is very, very likely the sketchiest place I have ever visited. The entire city was crawling with heavily armed men, both police and not police. We were not being stared at by large groups. We never had any problems and transferred through Spanish Town many times, but it always felt risky. Went to Montego Bay in 2013 to an all-inclusive resort with my wife. We were going to walk around the town and take in the area and were promptly stopped by the resort security guard, who told me that was a bad idea and only go on the resort-sponsored trips as they have armed guards. We did a day trip to some of the local tourist spots, and one of the stops was a street market for craft goods and such. As soon as we exited the van, we were surrounded by vendors who tried to separate me and my wife from each other, pulling us in different directions. I was pretty scared as we didn't know what was going on, and from that moment on, we held each other's hand pretty tightly. Speaking of Jamaica, back in 2023, I'm pretty sure my ex tried to have me raped or killed, at least twice. This was in Montego Bay. He lives in a not-so-great area, and this was my first time on the island. Anyway, one day we went to work in a pretty run-down and isolated area and insisted I go with him even though I wanted to stay home. We get there, and immediately upon arriving, he freaking remembered he forgot something at home and left me standing alone in that neighborhood for 10 minutes. As soon as his car pulled off, I'm not even kidding you, 4 men emerged from separate directions, ready to approach me. Luckily, a very nice old man came and saved my ass and then cussed out my ex. Story 7. West Memphis is so sketchy. West Memphis is actually the most terrifying place to me. As soon as you enter it, it freaking stinks for one. It smells like death, and 2, I was traveling through on the way to Texas, and stupidly had to stop to fill up and went to Citgo, right on the service station road by 40 at 1 a.m. And almost got abducted, like not even kidding. I was the only person in the gas station. The cashier was speaking in a different language on FaceTime with someone and started being super slow and dragging the transaction out as soon as I hopped back in my car. A black car pulled up with someone driving and someone in the back passenger side and tried blocking me in. I just know it was a setup. I worked in the incident response center for a major trucking company, and they were responsible for dispatching high-value loads. All high-value load drivers were under strict orders to never ever under any circumstance stop for anything in West Memphis. They were told to schedule their driving hours for a break before or after going through West Memphis. No gas, no sleep, no food, no dot breaks. One instance of stopping in West Memphis without having a delivery in West Memphis was automatic termination. Once on a church trip from Indiana to New Orleans, our leader wanted to take us to Lambert's to experience the Throwed Rolls, so we took a detour through Missouri and Arkansas. Didn't end up going to Lambert's anyway, since we thought we had a reservation, but they don't actually take reservations. Anyway, we had a hotel booked in West Memphis, but on the way there, our bus ran out of gas on the side of the interstate. After waiting for another van in our group to drop people off at the hotel and get a gas can, we go to this rundown gas station straight out of some zombie movie. While filling up, this dude with a guitar walks up and starts playing some original tunes. Of course, the guys getting gas were the chatty type too. Then we finally get to the hotel and wake up in the morning to all of our luggage being stolen out of the church bus. And of course, it was parked right outside the view of the CCTV cameras. Drove to Mississippi and spent several hours getting clothes and other essentials for the week. Overall, a fun trip though. So, this past year I went to Ching's Wings on Getwell Road. My coworker said the hotel said they were the best wings in Memphis. Once we got off the exit, I knew we weren't supposed to be there. Against my better judgment, we still went. Two dudes get into it while we're in there and take it outside. We're sitting right by the window, and I say to my female coworker that we need to get away from the window. As we get up and turn around, we realize everyone else has already taken shelter in the back of the restaurant, crouched down. Thankfully, nothing happened, but we were huddled up in the back with 10 strangers for about 10 minutes until everything calmed down. Memphis is a freaking cesspool. Story 8. Baghdad or Baltimore at night. Shot at in both places, at least in Baghdad I was also armed. I played a show at Cyclops on North Ave. The drive there was straight out of The Wire, where Chris and Snoop put bodies in the boarded up vacant. Our show was lovely though. A super crazy bookstore that had all kinds of folks from the neighborhood coming in and enjoying the music together. Homeless guys came in and danced, and the owner gave them some food. After dark, dozens of trans prostitutes came out of the housing projects behind the shop. It was the craziest place I've ever been. Looked unsafe, but never felt unsafe there. Andy, the owner, just passed away a few weeks ago. He was a great guy. My company used to have a location in Baltimore. I went there twice, the first time traveling with a coworker who had been there a few times and did all the driving, the second time alone. I remember being shocked to see the entire facility was encased with tall fencing topped with barbed wire. I thought that was a little excessive, and when I asked about it, I was told that part of town was not the best. When I went there alone, my hours were weird, and everyone was being so mother hen about me, telling me how to get to the facility from my hotel, not to go down certain streets, and to keep an eye out for certain things. Safe to say I was terrified. I was there for 3 days, that trip, and never went back. Yep, came here to say Baltimore, lived there for 5 years and came to love it, but it was definitely an acquired taste. Moved there with my ex-husband for great job opportunities. We were both from Austin. I was born and raised there, so live music was a huge part of our lives. Naturally, we decided to check out Baltimore's local music scene within our first couple of weeks there. We ended up at this sketchy dive bar but weren't feeling it, so we left after about 30 minutes. As we were driving home around 11 p.m., we were still new to the city and following GPS blindly. We came to a 4-way stoplight, no other cars around, and the light was taking forever. I was already uneasy and thinking about just running it. Then out of nowhere, we heard 5 gunshots, close and loud. I ducked, peeked up just enough to see, and watched 3 men dressed in black run right past my car, followed by a black Infiniti speeding by. Without a second thought, I floored it and got us out of there. Made it home safely, but I was shaken. I told my coworkers about it the next Monday and they just laughed. They told me, yeah, that sounds about right. At night, never fully stop at intersections. Just check if it's clear and roll through. Cops won't stop you. After that, I never had another major incident, though the squeegee kids throwing stuff at my car on street corners was a constant annoyance. Story 9. Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Every property is surrounded by solid fences topped with razor wire, and if you can afford it, patrolled by armed guards and guard dogs. As a visitor, you should never use a local taxi or walk outside your hotel compound at night. I went there as a 15 white boy with blonde hair and blue eyes for their national swimming competition, and we were hosted by families. The lady hosting us said to me right after we got there, if you want to go for a walk, don't take any money or wear a watch because you will get robbed. The word will was so crazy to me, not if or could, it was will. Others that stand out. They had a 14-year-old security guard who was a member of the most feared gang in Papua New Guinea, so younger than me. They informed us that this is because if anyone touched their home, they would enforce it. They had a beautiful home. It was surrounded by barbed wire, 2 huge German shepherds, and 2 maids. They had a satellite with every movie in the theaters and hundreds of channels. They informed me that copywriting was not enforceable in Papua New Guinea. True or not, I didn't care. It was awesome. One of the best swimmers at the comp was attacked and stabbed with a piece of corrugated iron, and his friend was abducted on the first night of the meet. Anytime there was a red light at a stoplight, they just blew through it because they would get carjacked. People would stare at you and smile and have these crazy eyes and bright red stains on their teeth from eating beetle nuts. It was so hot and humid during the day, they didn't let us compete from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. There is a lot more. With this, the place, the people, the culture is insanely beautiful. I've told this story here before. I knew some geologists who worked at the Volcano Observatory in Rabaul. A new guy was getting his first ride around the area to familiarize him with the place. Halfway down the mountain, their driver just stopped the car in the road for no reason and waited. The experienced guy grabbed the newbie, dragged him out of the car, yelled, "Run," and took off down the hillside as fast as he could go. They got clear before a bunch of guys with machetes arrived. The road went back to the town, so they stayed within sight of it and walked back to their compound. My dad was good friends with another geologist who was taken hostage in the late 1970s by some anti-Indonesian fighters on the PNG/Irian Jaya, as it was then, border. Their party had a few Indonesian soldiers with them for security who were executed. After a few weeks, he was taken to a town and left near the local police station. Story 10. St. Louis. It was weird for a few reasons, but the scariest was when I was leaving the hotel my mom and my 2 large dogs were staying at. We saw a man messing with my car, like the hood was propped. As I started raising my voice and approaching with my large barking dogs, he ran. I made sure to push the hood down so it would latch. Or so I thought. We loaded the car up and drove away as fast as possible. As soon as we got on the freeway, the hood blew up and almost hit the windshield. I honestly have no idea how it didn't. Maybe a safety feature? So I had to pull over and resecure it. Mofo obviously messed something up on purpose because he pulled up behind us. I got back in the car, my digs and my mom losing their crap, drove slowish, put my hazards on, and my mom called 911. He sped off after taking pics. Weirdest experience of my life. The hotel was so sketchy and my intuition was telling me to leave the entire time. I honestly think the man was in on something with the hotel staff, or was the hotel staff himself. My 2 dogs were extremely on edge, and they're generally easygoing. Plate numbers were stolen and police couldn't/wouldn't do anything. I worked in downtown St. Louis. I was driving out of the parking lot at work last summer for lunch when a car with 4 dudes wrapped up pulled into the parking lot and slowed down to stare at me. I noped out of there pretty quickly and waited for the security guards to do their thing. Had someone get shot outside of my work one afternoon, and again another afternoon, and again another afternoon. I'm in the downtown tourist area. It gets much worse when you go north. The news doesn't bother reporting on a shooting unless there is a fatality and is a slow news day. Don't go north and avoid I-70 through downtown. If it looks sketchy where you are, then you need to hurry up. Stop signs are optional. East St. Louis and the cities immediately around it are not a place to be after 9 to 10 p.m. Story 11. Tijuana. I lived there for 2 years as a runaway teen. This was over 30 years ago, but I'm fairly certain it hasn't gotten better. Did mission work there when I was 17 and just walked away from the mission group on their last night. They left a note saying I was going to hang out there for a few extra days. The trip leader lost his crap, called my parents, and my dad said leave him there. So I got to stay in Tijuana for about 6 weeks before I got bored. Went back to the missionary church, hooked up with another group from a different church and traveled back with them. This was in the early 2000s, and I can say it probably improved from your time there. Other than a few really bad areas, which were obvious, you could easily stay safe there. In fact, I started with about $6,000 US and a passport and ended with around $800 and my passport. All my missing money went to weed, tacos, beer, and my hotel. Story 12. I have traveled to lots of places in this world. The most scared I have ever been was lost in downtown Baltimore at night on a weekend. I had made a series of mistakes trying to go around the city and had accidentally taken a spur that put me right into downtown. I have no clue what area of town I drove through, but the only human beings I saw out and about at 3 in the morning looked like zombies. It's really hard to describe, but the way that they moved, the way that they looked at me as I drove by, it was very scary. Out of desperation, this was way before cell phones did anything more than phone calls and basic texts. I was still using a paper atlas. I stopped at a 7-Eleven, I was waiting in line to ask for directions, and a guy went out of his way to ask me what I was doing there. That's how much I stood out. I told him that I was trying to get directions and to get back onto the highway, and he told me that he was an undercover cop. Things were about to go down right there, and I needed to leave. I told him that's what I was trying to do. He thought about it for a second, told me to get in my car, follow him, and try to keep up. He would get me to an on-ramp and then go back to the store. He drove like a bat out of hell and did get me to the freeway and then busted a U-turn and flew away. I have no clue how bad my night would have continued to be if he hadn't been there and guided me out of there.
College students, what is the dumbest thing you've heard a fellow student say? Not necessarily something they said, but my friend was in an online course, and they had to write a simple paragraph about themselves as a first assignment. Someone got caught plagiarizing. How does that happen? Who plagiarizes about themselves? Have no idea. The professor made a huge deal about it too. I'm guessing that they had to do something similar for another course, so they just copied and pasted it, which in my opinion takes more effort than writing from scratch. My favorite has got to be when a student read World War II as World War XI. Student: do rocks have DNA? Professor: no, rocks are not living. Student: then how do they reproduce? How is there not only just one rock? This was a 300-level genetics class. A friend of mine moved into a new place at the start of his second year and threw a big house party to celebrate. It was great. It was wild and fun was had. While nothing got broken, his living room got messed up quite a bit. Pillows all over the place, chair tipped over. I think someone made a fort out of pizza boxes. Anyway, I go around this dude's house about 5 months later, and the living room is largely in the same state I saw it last at the party. In fact, so was lots of the house. It had barely been cleaned. Mold was on a ton of their dishes, and there was a mushroom growing out of the wall in the bathroom. I asked him why the hell he hadn't tidied any of it up, and he said, "We figured we'd have another party again soon, so why bother cleaning up?" The other day I heard a girl giving a speech about nicotine addiction. This was supposed to be informative and have credible sources. I kid you not, I do not believe that cigarettes are addictive. I tried them once, and I am not addicted. I had to try very hard not to start laughing. A friend of mine told me that in his communication class, a girl once gave a speech on why football players don't need helmets. You could make the argument that helmets and large pads allow players to hit each other much harder and more recklessly. If they didn't wear helmets, the most dangerous tackles like spearing wouldn't happen. Rugby doesn't have helmets, and they have way fewer concussions. One time in class, a girl was doing a presentation where she described a man from Uganda as African American, and didn't understand why that wasn't right. A girl I knew studied abroad in Europe, and she kept on mentioning an African American she had a fling with. I asked if he was from the States, and she said no. He had a British accent. I said, well, that doesn't really make him African American. She called me a racist. In a literature class, girl: so all those Greek gods and goddesses, what happened to them? Professor confused: you mean in the story? Girl: no, like what happened to them? Professor: I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Girl: like why are they not around anymore? Did they all die? The whole class was just stunned into silence. The professor gave her a very vague answer like, well, that's open to your own interpretation. I could tell she was trying not to sound condescending. She handled that way better than I would have. I had a friend ask me if the IRS was going to come after him since he did not pay his internet bill for 3 months. It was in a math class when a teacher was trying to get a girl to understand that 1/3 is larger than 1/4, but she wasn't having any of it. According to her, 1/4 was larger because there are 4 quarters to make a whole and only 3 quarters to make 1, 2. So there are more quarters. More is larger, therefore a quarter is larger. Even when the teacher tore a piece of paper in 3 and another in 4, wrote 1/3 and 1/4 on the corresponding papers, threw everything away but 1 1/3 and 1 1/4, and asked her which was larger, she still went for the quarter. The teacher sat down, didn't say anything for a minute, and then continued class. That was the first time I'd ever witnessed someone giving up on a person like that. I seem to remember A&W advertised a third-pound burger in comparison to McDonald's quarter-pound burgers for the same price, but due to people thinking a third was smaller, no one bought them. A lot of people don't understand basic fractions. During an MBA marketing class, we had group projects where we basically had a set of data given to us to come up with a marketing plan. One group took the customer data and proudly averaged all of the customer zip codes to get the geographical center of their customer base. Later, in the professor's office, they argued when the professor told them it didn't work that way. The team leader said, "Well, that's just your opinion," and stomped out. I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Zip codes do not correspond to geographic coordinates, so averaging them does nothing. All you get is an average of zip code numbers. I was about to graduate and move to Europe with my husband, my classmate. You'll be surprised when you get there. Europeans look American. You won't be able to tell a difference. Me, you should retake history. Still my favorite. This one occurred in the stacks at the University of Kentucky in the spring of 2014. Girl, I have no idea how I got chlamydia, but I didn't cheat on you. Boy, bullcrap, you frickin' slept with so-and-so. Girl, no way, I must have gotten it from the bathroom at some random bar. Boy, you can get chlamydia from toilet seats? Girl, duh, of course you can. Boy, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Ladies and gentlemen of Reddit, I present the future of our country. Boy, is he in for a surprise when she gets pregnant from the swimming pool. How many pages do I need to write for the 5-page paper? This isn't always true. My WR227, technical report writing, required for engineering, teacher back in the fall told us that we were only writing 13 pages in our 25-page report. The rest was filled with the table of contents, index, appendices, and other useless/useful crap. I thought Ben Franklin invented lightning. This was said during a class on Western civilization. He isn't Asian, he's from Japan. Student: Are Chinese people Asian? Professor: Yes. Are Asian people Chinese? Professor: Well, some, but not all. Student: How is that possible? Well, Asia is a continent, and China is a country on that continent. So Vietnamese people are Chinese? No, they're Asian, but not Chinese. How's that possible? Vietnam is a different country. Oh, okay, so they're the same as Koreans, in that they're both Asian and not Chinese, yeah. So just the Chinese aren't Asian? This hurt. It really, really hurt. The professor should have drawn a Venn diagram to easily illustrate it to the student. That way there could be a slight chance it could have spun his gears, since he might be the kind of person to understand concepts better visually. I had a kid in class who did not believe in science. Not a specific branch of science or any particular theory, just science in general. It was all just made up by the government. The thing about it though is that we were in school to become aircraft mechanics, and if you tried explaining the physics of flight to him, he would adamantly deny it. Luckily, he was kicked out for failing a drug test. As it is, I am already not comfortable flying knowing some of the people who went on to be employed by major airlines. Actually, a week ago, we had just gotten out of our final exam for the year, and this girl is making her way to the door. Before she even reaches it, she says to her friend, "Yeah, I had to copy a few parts of my book to reach the word count." You ever hear a record scratch in real life? And that 90s meme following it? That pretty much happened. The teacher called this girl up to the front and silently, without a word, began to go into the paper logs and saw that Turnitin had a 75% plagiarism rate. The girl I had a crush on copied her whole report for a semester project from Stack Overflow. It was so bad, 91% plagiarism rate, that the professor, who was lazy, hid it so that he wouldn't have to deal with the hassle of reporting her and gave her an A. And she thought no one knew, but pretty much everyone in our common circle knows. And she's now going to join a prestigious tech company in London while I'm still searching for a good job. Some days I do not know what to make of life. I'm never going to need to know this for my career. He was talking about Calculus 1 and he majors in mechanical engineering. He's technically not wrong, given that with that attitude, his major is certainly not going to end up as his career. Even still, maybe he'll spend the rest of his life as a drafter or a machinist or something. He could get an engineering job and not touch calculus very much at all. A friend of mine was taking apart a printer in the IT lab, and another friend turned to see him opening it up and yelled, "Don't drink the ink!" completely seriously, because that's how dumb he thought the first friend was, that he would immediately drink printer ink if given the chance. We were playing a drinking game. Someone correctly answers a question with Afghanistan. This girl laughs out loud and goes, "Afghanistan isn't a country." We all turned at once and laughed at her. If fish don't have lungs, how do they breathe? I'm a second-year biology student. Professor was demonstrating the need for quality checks, asked several students to measure a piece of paper that was normal printer paper sized. One kid was supposed to measure in inches, another was supposed to measure in centimeters. The kid who measured in centimeters said the paper was 108 centimeters long. Now, this is regular paper, 1 foot long on its longest day. This fellow did not even think twice before saying it was over a meter long. Nobody even picked up on this until it was remeasured for a quality check. Mind-blowing. He probably confused length with the perimeter. One girl asked if she went $300 over her credit limit, if she would have to pay it back. No, it's free money. On the first day of freshman year, I sat down in a classroom after listening to a lecture about evolution. The girl who sat down next to me had also been in the previous lecture. She said to me that lecture was so weird because I don't believe in evolution. Like, I just don't. This was in an honors college course. I later asked the girl what she was majoring in. It was biology. 2 girls, business majors, very stereotypy, around 2010. We should start a website where anyone can sign up and simply pay a fee to charge their laptops over the internet. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. No mention of peripherals, so I can only assume the website hacks into the router you're connected to, turns it into a Tesla coil, and arcs a surge of electricity from the device to your laptop battery. Teacher: we are on chapter 6 now. Says it verbally and then proceeds to write it on the board. 10 seconds later, Student 1, what chapter are we on? Teacher: we are on chapter 6. Student 2, who sits right next to Student 1, are we on chapter 6 now? Teacher with a confused face: yes? Never underestimate a student's ability to just not. Me: what's your major? Guy: it was aerospace engineering. Me: whoa, that's cool, but what do you mean was? Guy: I'm on academic probation with the university because my GPA is too low, so I'm switching majors. Me: okay, I'm sorry to hear that. What are you switching to? Guy: religious studies. I can get a job as a pastor. Me: alright, so you are big into church? Guy: no, I rarely go, but I can worry about that later. This is the perfect example of what happens when you tell teenagers that everybody needs to go to college. Teacher: name a country beginning with E. Classmate: euthanasia? For reference, I live in England. So at university, I got quite involved with the radio station and the campus nightclub. This connection led me to putting on a lot of concert/club nights for the radio station at the nightclub, and I've had a few people wanting to get involved. One always sticks out. A friend of mine has the idea that he's going to raise £1 million to build a school in Africa. I can't remember precisely what part of Africa, but I think it was going to be in a part where you can build a decent school for a lot less than £1 million. I was the man he was approached to partner with him. We had a venue that held 1,600 people, so you can do your own maths on how much we'd need to get out of each attendee. Students on limited funds, who already had 3 regular nightclubs every week to choose from, in order to hit his target, and that's ignoring the litany of overheads that such an event would incur. As the conversation wore on, it became clear that he needed me to do near enough of everything. His role was more of a visionary, a figurehead, and someone to invite a lot of people to a Facebook event. To his credit, he had clout there. But all of that, I suppose I can overlook this as a result of eagerness, ambition, and naivety. What really made my head hit the desk was when, after giving me this whole pitch, he says, "The first thing we need to think about is celebrities." It all unraveled at that moment. I realized that his interest in building a school in Africa was only a portion of his motivation. The big driving force was that he wanted to meet Beyoncé, and that I was supposed to somehow organize it. Guess what? That event never happened. We shouldn't have to vaccinate men for HPV because it doesn't hurt them. I actually had this argument with a peer and a professor. They still didn't understand it in the end. We are all scientists. But even if it didn't increase the risk of getting cancer in men, wouldn't it make sense to stop transmission to women by vaccinating men? What about the logic is unclear? Seems like they were thinking about it theoretically rather than realistically. Sure, if you vaccinate 100% of women, you wouldn't necessarily need to vaccinate men. Realistically, vaccinating men will reduce cases in women much faster than vaccinating women alone. And in the long run, perhaps even wipe out HPV altogether. But I'm pretty sure HPV can increase cancer risk in men too, so their argument is flawed from the start. I grade the homework for an astronomy class. One time, there was a question asking which superior planets farther from the sun than Earth, were visible at midnight at that time. One student said, Sun. It is the brightest planet. I had to stop grading for a bit because I couldn't stop laughing. The word planet comes from the Greek word meaning wanderers, and used to refer to all the objects that moved relative to the stars behind them, the sun and the moon included. The more you know. First week of college, I watched this kid cut in line and get confronted by his peers. His response was, "As far as I'm concerned, I'm more attractive than you." That is so stupid that it's brilliant. You are accused of embezzling $10 million from the company pension fund. Do you have anything to say in your defense? As far as I'm concerned, I'm more attractive than you. Case dismissed. I always thought that Gatorade was a scam. Turns out it has electrolytes and stuff that you need when you're dehydrated. It's got what plants crave. I love breast cancer because it makes everything pink. This one is the absolute dumbest I've read so far. If you cheat on your girl once a month for a year, you're still 97% faithful. Math checks out. In an ethics class, a girl decked out in a horrible clash of designer name brands on every article of clothing and personal possession raised her hand and said, "The difference between rich people and poor people is that rich people know how to say thank you." We were discussing the differences between wealthy and poverty level treatment in a courtroom. Also, in a final exam for a criminal procedure class, there was a typo. I forget what it said, but it was supposed to say mortal, as in mortal wound. Everyone pretty much made out what it was supposed to say through the context of the sentence. Except this one girl. She went up to ask the teacher what the misspelled word meant, and he announced to the class the correct spelling. She stood there and asked him what mortal meant. He just looked at her and said in the dead silence of a final exam, "You're a fourth-year criminal justice major in a criminal procedures class. I am not going to explain to you what a mortal wound is." I met someone my freshman year who for the life of him could not memorize the order of the months. My favorite happened just last week in my astronomy class. Someone else in the class had asked the professor if Pluto would be considered a planet again soon, and he explained that they were skirting around a classification that would make 100 things in our solar system a planet. And someone from the back of the class speaks up and says, "Freaking liberals wanting to include everyone." Excuse me? It was so shocking all I could do was laugh. Also, not a dumb saying, just a dumb action. This guy always sat in the front row. Also, constantly 20 minutes late and proceeded to take photos of every slide of the PowerPoints, despite every single thing being online, while he also had a laptop in front of him that I saw him use 3 times all semester, twice for tests. I met a guy once that believed that homosexuality didn't exist. Not that he believes that gay marriage should be illegal, not that he thought it was immoral, not that he thought it was disgusting, not that he was homophobic. He really just thinks that homosexuality or anything other than heterosexuality is non-existent. I couldn't argue with him because I didn't know what to argue. I was an English major, so a lot of my classes involved writing papers. Most of the professors would set deadlines when they were due that were outside of class hours. We had one paper that was due before 12 a.m., you know, like midnight, which you should know by the time that you get to college. This one girl showed up the next day to class and tried to hand in her paper. The professor explained that she was going to be marked down because it was late. What do you mean it's late? You needed to have it in before 12, but it's only 10 right now. There's still 2 hours before 12 a.m. Even after he explained, she still had an attitude and ended with, "Well, you should say 12 at night, that way everyone would know." This is the reason my entire department makes anything due online at either class time or 11:59 p.m. Yeah, I got a 1.7 GPA! I got a 2.9 and I thought that was bad. Man, you have such a big computer. That thing's gotta take up 6 Wi-Fis. A girl in my music appreciation class once called a cello a guitar. Not a student anymore, but a girl in my dorm asked me, "So, is Gandhi a real person or a character in a cartoon?" "He is? How can you know he's real?" Facepalms. Facepalms for everyone. My name is Brittany. I joined astronomy because I want to learn about the galaxies. My favorite things include volunteering, coffee, and really, really, really old animated movies like The Lion King and The Little Mermaid. One of my first classes after separating from the Navy, 6 deployments and 2 wars later. No one tells you how insufferably bad college kids will be. I didn't realize getting cash back wasn't free money. I really made my parents mad. I once had an argument with one of my flatmates because she genuinely thinks that French people think in English and that they just translate that into French before they speak. Apparently everyone thinks in English, even people who don't speak it. Went to a southern university, and my first roommate told me out of nowhere she didn't think the South should have been made to give up their slaves. When I just turned and stared at her in disbelief, I had been doing something on my computer. She said, "I know slavery was wrong, but that was their livelihood." She basically went on about how it destroyed the South, and after a while, I gave up trying to talk sense into her. I mean, the loss of slaves did do a number on the South's economy, but that's not the point. Like child labor, 12-hour days, no minimum wages, and no safety standards led to a higher profit margin during the Industrial Revolution. Humans are more important than money. Teacher: "All right, Tom, why don't you begin the reading?" Tom: "Okay, this is F. Scott Fitzgerald by The Great Gatsby. Chapter 1. Professor here. Student was upset that I didn't send him an email reminding him his homework was due. I apologized and asked if there was anything else I could do for him. Maybe his laundry, grocery shopping, etc. He stormed out of the classroom. Other students laughed. Cigarettes aren't addicting. I smoke them all the time. Is the nitrogen used to grow this broccoli cruelty-free? This is organic, grass-fed, non-GMO, vegan, and gluten-free nitrogen. What's 7 divided by 2? Needless to say, she failed basic algebra and dropped out a semester later. First day of World War II class. Girl: "So did the Germans win the war? Did someone tell her the winner on the first day? Freaking spoilers, man. No point in going to the rest of the class now." Really late to the party, but I've got a decent one. A girl at a party was wearing a nice watch that totally matched her outfit. I commented and said, "Nice watch. Can you tell me what time it is?" She proceeds to pull her cell phone out of her purse and say, "It's 10. When I asked her why she didn't just look at her watch, she said, "It's a watch. It doesn't tell time." Dead freaking serious. I cheersed her and laughed my way to the balcony. A girl in my English class wrote that legalizing gay marriage would create 800 million new jobs in the United States. Before class started, a few of us were talking about various states we had been to. One mentioned Alaska being attached to Canada. This prompted a girl to chime in that Alaska is an island. She apparently thought that Alaska and Hawaii were located at the southwest corner of the US, like they are portrayed in the maps that just show the 50 states. My friend thought Uganda was a music festival. A few weeks ago, I overheard a girl on the phone on campus say, "I don't know why my dad is so mad at me. He's the one who keeps putting money in my account. I can't help that I spend it. It's so unfair." I was an exchange student from the Netherlands in the US a couple years ago. A girl comes up to me to ask if we have grass in my country and then asks if the Netherlands is a town in Germany. I had a girl interrupt the professor mid-lecture to ask if dragons are real. It was an archaeology lecture. This was my first day of anatomy, sophomore year. Keep in mind that a prerequisite bio class was needed to take this class. Professor: "Okay, can anyone tell me what organic means?" Someone's hand shoots up. Organic means there aren't any preservatives or additives, so the tissue is pure, like in nature. This person did not last long in that class. Doing a presentation on the moon landing, and they had pictures of Lance Armstrong on there, not Neil. In the chemistry lecture, I don't believe in vitamin D deficiency. Some kid in one of my lectures around Thanksgiving goes, "Wait, there are turkeys, like, in the wild? Like naturally occurring?" Naturally occurring. As a girl from rural western Pennsylvania, this was the funniest thing I'd heard in a while. A classmate once explained to me that our country had failed to fulfill its societal obligation to him by not providing him with a career for his previously earned degree, which was history. Final year neuropsychology module, but we only use 10% of our brains. Shudder. That person was speaking from experience. I'm a vegan, while holding a drink made mostly of cream and while wearing a leather person boots. This took me a while to believe, and I was there when it was said. The girl in class didn't know who Khrushchev was. Someone made fun of her and asked, "Well, do you know who Hitler was?" She answered meekly, "Well, yeah, he was the leader of the Jews." She didn't understand why everyone started laughing. I almost regret sleeping with her. Almost regret. You, sir, have won. Vietnam is a country? I thought it was a war. That made the whole lecture just completely go silent. Are unicorns endangered or extinct? I mean, I know they're not really around anymore, but which is it? Once in my psych class, a woman stood up who was in a small group, asked the lecturer if 2 minutes was the same as 120 seconds, because her group wasn't able to do the required test because they spent the 2 minutes arguing about how many seconds it was. These were 4th-year university students. Oh, you're from England? What did you speak back there? Your English is really good. Why didn't Christopher Columbus just fly to America? I also once convinced the same girl that 6 are axe-wielding cannibals who worship orangutans, and she put it as a dot point in her final presentation. This girl put her hand up in science class and asked the teacher if traffic lights were black and white in the old days. The worst part was the fact that she made me second-guess myself for a brief moment. The sun isn't a star, stupid, it's a sun. Why can't you swim under Hawaii? She wasn't joking. Guy: are you a fan of Bon Jovi? Girl: sorry, I don't like Italian food. Someone ordered water with no ice because it has fewer calories. Why can't poor people just buy themselves out of poverty? In economics class, a girl said, "I didn't know the wood was made out of trees," and she was serious. She said some other dumb crap too, but that was the only one I remember and later ended up dropping out. In a grad-level EU studies class that cross-listed with the law school, one of the law students, in response to the question of how to encourage countries like China to pollute less, said, and I kid you not, maybe the EU should pollute more, then China would feel bad about it. Definitely when a girl who wore Halloween costume fairy wings to class, go figure, stormed out of the class never to be seen again when the rest of the class informed her that The Lord of the Rings was not in fact a true story. I was just out of a class and walking out of the building in a large group. A guy at the front opens the door and holds it open behind him so the girl behind him doesn't get hit in the face. Her response to this was, "I have a boyfriend." The guy started killing himself laughing and now it's a meme at our uni. People are dumb. There is a story like that in Italy. Guy: do you have an eraser? Girl: I have a boyfriend. Guy: if he can erase pencils, that works too. Well, we have kosher meat, don't we? A girl in my political science class defending the death penalty. In a paleontology course, upon hearing Stegosaurus had a neural clump towards its butt that acted as a second brain, did the two brains ever fight each other for control of the body? Let's be real here. That question is rad enough in concept. I thought the sky was blue because it reflected off the ocean. This was 13 years ago and I'll never forget it. To be fair, I remember being taught this back in elementary school. Actually, I remember my 6th grade science teacher explaining it to us. Philosophy class, during a lecture on inductive reasoning. Some guy asks how it's different from his induction oven at home. He's either an idiot or the greatest philosopher of all time. Men, what makes your interest level in a woman go from 100 to 0 the fastest? Having to chase her constantly. If I'm the only one acting like I give a crap, I'm no longer giving a crap. My dad always told me never to chase after women or buses. The next one will be along in 10 minutes. She says or does things to test the relationship or see how I would react. Easy. I leave or state you should go if at my house. I once watched a video of this girl who asked these camera guys to hire a porn star and find out if her boyfriend would cheat on her. He shut the porn star down, saying he had a girlfriend, and then when his girlfriend revealed that she was just testing him, he dumped her. Respect. That's no relationship I want to be in. Making fun of someone's appearance. To hell with you, you random woman. That man in my thrift shop is Peter. He was in a horrific car accident when he was younger and suffered a brain injury as well as some scarring. That's why he dresses a bit funny and looks kinda dumpy. But he comes in almost every day to buy photo frames to put pictures of his parents and who died in that car accident. Don't judge a book by its cover. That is flat out one of the most tragic things I've ever heard. Does he have anyone helping him out? Is he doing okay? He does okay. He lives with his grandma. I ran into them while at the supermarket one day. Plays on her phone the whole time we hang out. Went on a Tinder date with a girl that definitely just tried to get a free meal. I noticed Mike pop up multiple times. Could be an uncle or something, but I really doubt it. When the bill came, I said, "Oh, we'll be splitting it." The look she gave me was great, except then she revealed she didn't even bring her purse. Good times, Megan. I guess you better give someone a call then. Anyway, here's my half. Have a good one. If she gives me the silent treatment without even telling me why she's upset. As a guy, I don't do silent long. But sometimes I do it if I think it's going to make things worse, or especially if I know my position is wrong. Like I'm irrationally angry about something minor. Doesn't happen much, but it's happened a few times in my life. I don't want to talk then because I know I'm being dumb and I just want to cool off on my own. Usually I go, look, I am just irritated today and irrational, so just warning that I am not ignoring you and to avoid me. Better than just not saying anything at all and appearing like I'm sulking. Doesn't add anything to the conversation. If it takes immense effort to maintain a conversation with you, then it's a turnoff for me. It's not my responsibility to make a conversation happen. It's a team effort. Just women? For me, this is how I judge friends. Can't stand being the only one trying. So brutal to carry conversations. I hate silence after a great conversation and try to fill it, but all the time, it's difficult. She lies little white lies to other people, often, especially people close to her. I had a friend who would not only do this, but make up entire stories of completely realistic anecdotes and then burst out giggling that other people actually believed her. Like she was on vacation in LA and saw a certain celebrity in a store. Or she has a relative that does a certain job related to the topic of discussion. Things normal people wouldn't be inclined to lie and make up stories about. She moved to another city because our group apparently has too much drama. It wasn't until over the course of the next several years and people comparing stories that we eventually figured out that she was probably a psychopath. So yeah, totally with you on this one. Consistently lying is a huge red flag. I know if someone can keep something like that from their parents or people that they know their whole lives, it's easy to keep it from me. Ironically enough, the girl I'm referencing didn't lie for fun, just for convenience. She was truthful about sleeping with another guy hundreds of miles away, though I carried on seeing her after. I knew in my gut after her telling me how dishonest she was to her parents, this was not going to go well. But I'm a man and I'm stupid. She's rude. Mine is when she makes plans and promises you didn't even ask for, then backs out at the last moment. Happened to me a few weeks ago. She said she was really into me, wanted to go out and stuff like that. The day comes and she ghosts me. Thanks for wasting my time, Kirsten. Not sure if a typo, but this is how you get your name misspelled at Starbucks. Kirsten. It's Kirsten, but with a K and an I before the R and an E before the I. Barista. What the actual hell? No goals or ideas about what she wants to do in life. A lot of them are just banking on getting married and being a stay-at-home mom. No thanks, I'm trying to find someone to build the Second Prussian Empire with. When she keeps referencing her ex, nothing says, "You are only here to fill the void," more than her constantly reminding you she had someone before you. Might be an unpopular opinion, but if you're both with someone for a long time, sometimes it's hard to find stories that don't involve an ex. I was thinking of contributing the same thing. I had a guy get on my case for bringing up an ex too often, according to him, and I was like, well, we dated for 2 years and lived together. I can't really talk about those 2 years without him coming up. For instance, he'd asked if I had ever been camping. I'd say yes and give some details to be conversational, and he'd ask, "Who'd you go with?" and get mad when I gave an honest answer. There's no getting around the fact that I've dated before, but I don't mention the guys for some ulterior motive. Expects me to make all the moves in establishing the relationship. Reciprocity makes the world turn. Yes, and along these lines, if you like romance, then be romantic too. Some women think they're romantic, but what they mean is that they want romantic gestures done for them and have never considered doing romantic things for their man. Nothing takes me from 100 to 0 like being the only romantic in a relationship. I like extremely thoughtful, not necessarily expensive gifts, and surprises too. Make me a mixtape that expresses how you feel about me. Make me a picnic of my favorite things and meet me there with that surprise, etc. It doesn't even need to be large gestures like these all the time, or when you're extremely busy at work or daily or whatever, but just doing something extra for the person whenever you can shows that you're thinking about them and really care about them when they're not around. I love surprising my husband with a simple bouquet of flowers. He knows I got them at the grocery store, but the thought that he gets to get flowers seems to entrance him. Annoying voice. I don't care if she's the most beautiful woman on earth. If she has a stupid voice, I can't even be in the same room without internally screaming. I don't have to know that. I'm a girl. Do people honestly say that? The one time I said anything close to that was my husband was telling me that I needed to change my oil, and I told him that my dad refused to teach me anything related to a car. Told me that you'll either have a dad or a husband. You don't need to know that. If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. When she said, "If everyone else got the flu shot, I don't need to. Woman, I am a man of science, do not test me." Herd immunity? That's actually the argument of a regular anti-vaxxer. If everyone is getting their shots and vaccines are so good, then why should I or my kid get them? She's not like other girls. It's a phrase for a lot of young girls and young women. If a woman in her late 20s is still going on about it, she's dense. Or my other favorite is, "I don't like other women," or "I'm only friends with guys." Woo girls. I never believed in woo girls. Just thought it was a funny scene from How I Met Your Mother. Then one day a friend threw a birthday party for his girlfriend and invited all her college friends. I can't even exaggerate how bad it was. I was timing it down to 30 seconds between woos. Every song that came in, woo. Every dance move, woo. Every shot, woo. Every woo. I left early because of a migraine. When she doesn't like to be silly once in a while. There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes. Chews while her mouth is open. With gum. Never trust a child who chews bubblegum flavored bubblegum. And never trust an adult who chews gum at all. Anonymous. When she never graduated high school and has no real job, her dream is to open a strip club, and then she makes me look at photos of her getting spanked by various C-list celebrities and watch her cringe pole dancing videos on our first date at the bar. The absolute showstopper, though, was that her favorite house in Harry Potter was Hufflepuff. That's where I draw the line. Hey, I resent the anti-Hufflepuff sentiment. Some of us just aren't forward and want to be at home with a cup of tea. The type that seems to be on her phone all the time while she's with you, and then when you actually text her, she never responds to your texts, or responds with K, or LOL, or happy face emoji. I mean, I understand not having the time or not having anything to say, but really? After that, it's pretty clear she's not into you. She's also usually the type that will do this, and then when she comes to complain to you, you're instantly supposed to drop everything for her. If I spot a Live, Laugh, Love poster in her room, playing hard to get or acting uninterested, I'm 30. I don't have time to keep courting you to see if you come around. If you're not clearly into me on the first date, there won't be a second. Amen, brother. Same with trying to make plans. I'm not going to keep trying just to have you back out on them constantly. Bro, I hate this crap with a passion. It should not be a heavy burden to stay true to your word when it comes to making simple plans. I can deal with a rain check. Crap happens, right? But if it happens more often than not, I've lost total interest. No woman is that awesome to jump through that many hoops for. I once was dating a girl, and while at the bus stop, she suddenly said, "There are no attractive people around here right now." Super weird, but okay. I said, "Well, you missed a really cute Latina girl walk by a few seconds ago." And she says, "You're just pointing out another hot girl you saw? You can't do that, it makes me feel insecure." Noped on out. Everyone has insecurities, but damn. The relationship I had before that and now, we were constantly pointing out good-looking people to each other. She wanted you to feed her ego, and you didn't follow the script. Classic fishing for compliments gone wrong. Clueless about world events, attitude of better than others, materialistic, and poor spelling. Doesn't like animals or gets panicky about nature or dirt. Kids. I'm a single mom, and I understand this entirely. You didn't create the child, and therefore, it is in no way your responsibility to step up into a parent position. Many single moms think that a guy is rude or mean for not wanting to date them, but I'm cool with it. Unless someone genuinely wants children, then it's not fair to me or my child to expect them to take on my child as their own. Honestly, it goes both ways. I love my kid, but I really don't like other kids, so I won't date a guy that already has kids. I don't feel like I could love someone else's kids enough to justify being in their lives. I'm also just happy being a single mom, so I don't put too much pressure on myself to find my kid a dad, like some single moms do. If she smokes, it's an instant turnoff for me. My dad, mom, grandma, grandpa, and most of my aunts and uncles smoke or smoked, and I can't stand the crap anymore. A party girl is a turnoff for me too. I don't drink anymore for several reasons, and I'm done dealing with that lifestyle from anybody. I don't care if you drink a bit, but I'm not going out to bars, etc. and partying with you while you get crap-faced for 5 days a week. Same man, smoking is not attractive. Being an airhead. Intelligence is seriously sexy. Clingy. Thinking irrationally, losing their temper, and expecting others to be fine with it, and being a nasty piece of work in general. If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Equals crazy. A crappy attitude. I remember once I got this hot girl's number in college and took her out to dinner. She spent the entire time bitching about everything under the sun. Parents, friends, the food, the restaurant. At one point, I was tempted to sneak out, but I stuck it out and it actually got worse. After it was all said and done, she tried to get me to take her out again, but I weaseled out of it. Thinks she's better than she is, or has some kind of higher standard. You're human, love. We all crap and piss, yourself included. Super religious, says racist things, smokes, drugs issues, has 2 or more kids, or is always complaining. Religion doesn't bother me. It's when they focus their life solely on that and try to force their beliefs on other people is where the problem comes in. Entitlement. She complains about an issue but does nothing to try and solve it. I had a female friend try to explain to me that when women talk about problems, they just want men to listen and understand, not try to solve the problem. I can understand this to an extent, but boy is it infuriating to listen to the same problem over and over while she does nothing to fix it. Well, I guess, when they're like an adult or whatever, and for some reason they they still talk like this? That infuriated me. Well done. She's a narcissist. Talked to a woman recently, and her explanation to everything she didn't like coming from a man was mansplaining. I took it as pure narcissism. Can imagine how she took criticism from me on how not everyone was treating her differently. This is a 100 to 0 for me. Saying any man buzzword. 100 to 0 immediately. Using a baby voice? Talks badly about people and lies. If someone does something with you, they will do it to you. Anything about horoscopes or other new age bullcrap. It's insufferable to be subjected to that crap, and when a profile is full of it, you know the dialogue will be too. Had one try to get me to do crystal healing, and another refused to talk to me because of my astrological sign. I don't even know what it is. It's terrible. She and her so-called girlfriends like to get so crazy. Right? Give me a break. I don't like dogs. Okay, later. If she won't get off my ass about getting back into something I've cut out of my life entirely. These weren't decisions I made lightly. Half of the time, it felt like cutting off my own arm, even if the damned thing was gangrenous. I'm not sewing my metaphorical dead arm back on because I shouldn't have cut it off in the first place. I don't care if you don't like my life choices, but it's my life. Back off or get out. Oh yes, you're right. My choice to stop drinking is just because I didn't have the right people to drink with. Yep, that was why. According to my wife, marrying her, if I follow you, she insinuates your desire dropped off after marriage. Life tends to get grindy once the routine sets in. My hubby's libido ebbs and flows, and it took a long time to not internalize that crap. We show affection in very different ways, so after the initial honeymoon phase wore off, it was a learning curve. I've learned his tells for happiness and affection, amidst quite a bit of his reassurance, and that has helped tremendously. Good luck. If she's married or already has a boyfriend. Stupidity. Not having common sense. Thinks men have no issues. Some women have an inferiority complex that makes up a large part of their personality. Accepting that men have issues means hers aren't getting as much attention. Sucks. She's demanding, rude, or otherwise abusive towards service staff. If they are extremely rude and disrespectful towards or make fun of fast food workers. I worked at McDonald's for 6 months between jobs, and the people I worked with are some of the nicest people I've known. A lot of them were high school or college-aged kids just trying to earn some spending money or pay rent at their apartment. Others literally had nowhere else to go, but still came in with a smile. So whenever a woman, or anyone for that matter, starts crap-talking fast food workers or just being bullies, I automatically lose all respect for them. Also, a word of advice: if the same restaurant consistently messes up your order, it's either A, you came in at the busiest time of the day with a large or complex order, or B, you're very impatient and pushy, or C, you are always rude. The only real deal breaker for me is religion. If she has one, I'm not going to be able to connect with her well. This is not to say anything bad about religious people. Most people are religious. But in choosing a partner for me specifically, that would kill it. Dislike of animals. Not wanting to be equal in the relationship. This killed my last relationship. The standards she held herself to was clearly different than the standards she held me to. It was, You should take me out to eat, not let's go out to eat. The way she treated me and talked to me was not how I was supposed to talk to her or treat her. Worse, she couldn't see why that was a problem. Got out quickly. She smokes, talks too loud, and has no education. Never admitting fault or apologizing when they are wrong. No ambition, goals, achievement, or independence. Can I speak to the manager? I just don't like reading, or reading isn't my thing. It's one thing to be a picky reader or not have enough free time to get into a decent-sized book, but saying you are actively against reading is a huge red flag and makes me think less of you as a person. Talking about red flags. Talks about her horoscope. Tells me why she's big into homeopathy. Won't shut up about all these political causes she's active in, but in reality, it's just her liking/marking events on Facebook and never actually going to them. If they speak as if they are gangsters or can't spell at all, intelligence is super attractive. A few things. Playing hard to get is a big one. There's a difference between being coy or shy and just being annoying. The way she treats others. I walked out on a date after seeing the way she treated her kid and ended more than a few after seeing them treat waitstaff poorly or just being rude to others. Needing constant validation is another big one. I don't care for you begging for compliments constantly. If I didn't think you're beautiful, smart, and wonderful, etc., I wouldn't be with you in the first place. Being dumb or playing dumb. If we can't have a decent conversation, or if you constantly have to ask me to explain simple things, then we just aren't compatible. I don't expect everyone to be a genius, but I do expect people to know that the sun is a star and the earth is round. I nearly got set up with a girl who is apparently both crazy and incredibly racist. Prior to my knowledge of that, I had a really good feeling about meeting her. From our mutual friend's description, she sounded like an awesome girl that was straight up my alley. But the bad sort of crazy isn't something I want to deal with. If she says video games are dumb, just saving us both a lot of time by cutting it off there. When she gives attitude to everyone, then justifies that she's only exhibiting bad behavior due to stressful circumstances she's under. No matter how crappy a person's circumstances are, I don't think it gives them a right to be an asshole. Other reasons. Being irresponsible, refusing to clean up her mess, and refusing to let anyone else clean it. Being a woman child who can't take care of herself and throws tantrums in public. Thinking it's acceptable to cancel appointments and break promises that were made. It just shows disrespect for other people's time. Being anti-vaccine. I'm obviously never going to have kids with them, so I'd smash, but never be in a relationship with them. Can't have an intelligent conversation with her. In no particular order: 1. Smoking, 2. Being cruel, 3. She stinks, 4. Wasted, 5. Thinks Trump is great, and 6. Is irresponsible. Discovering that she eats the hell up with religion. Looking for a muscly 6-foot-tall man, ... She speaks like a valley girl. Like, oh my god? Low reading level. Rude to hospitality staff, waiters and waitress. When they act dumb but are actually not. This thread is mildly depressing. As a hetero woman, I actually find it pretty reassuring. Most of the answers are about hygiene, health, maturity, and life compatibility. Those to me are the least superficial things to base attraction on. There seem to be a lot of women out there who are trying to basically be Kim Kardashian. Not only do I despise Kim Kardashian and want nothing to do with any woman that wants to be like her, but I wouldn't want to be with a woman who's trying to be someone else anyway, even if I liked the person she was trying to be. Instant turnoff. Acts responsible, but turns out she isn't and uses me to get good grades. You thought she wanted the D, but it turns out she just wanted an A. For me, it's tattoos. I know this isn't a common thing for most guys, but to me it feels like there are way better ways to acknowledge or honor someone or something important to you than permanently marking your body. No, I don't want to know the story behind the Dreamweaver on your thigh, or why you have an arrow on your forearm. And honestly, I couldn't care less about that bullcrap pseudo-theosophical saying or lyric on your shoulder. If that stuff is really important to you, then talk to me about it. Don't permanently mark your body with it. That crap lasts forever. Tastes and ideas change as time passes. Mistakes can be made, and it won't remotely look that cool in about 20 years. To me, tattoos scream, I live in the moment and don't remotely consider the future. Also, as many other guys have suggested, smoking, crap talking about others, princess syndrome. I don't mind religiousness if it's genuine and not an excuse to cover up a bullcrap personality. When she lights up a cigarette. She believes something that I consider stupid. An example was a first date with a woman, and at some point our conversation was about speeding tickets. She told me that you don't have to pay a ticket if the cop was hiding when he clocked you on the radar, because that's entrapment. He has to be in clear view for the ticket to be enforceable. I didn't know her well enough to call her a fool, so I just nodded like I was learning something, but I was mentally swiping left. Make sure to say she's a feminist as soon and as often as possible. Or vegan, or Christian, or atheist, or whatever. Now realize that having certain values is one thing, and saying you belong to a certain group or ideology is another. The first has to do with how you live your life. The second has to do with how you want people to perceive you. And well, in my experience, it's a bad sign when people want you to focus on what they tell. It usually means that there's something not quite right with what they show. I dated a girl who believed everything Alex Jones said. If she isn't feminine, contrary to popular belief, feminine women are strong and powerful and much more pleasant to be around. I have the utmost respect for women who are confident in their femininity. When you find out she has kids, that she gets to see every other weekend. I don't believe in evolution. Done. Religion. Militant atheists are a big turnoff for me. I'm a princess. Clingy. If they're a liberal extremist, when they start foaming at their mouth over liberal issues by hating the other side or other liberals that don't think like them, I'd put right-wing extremists in this category too, but I don't know many conservatives because I'm liberal and travel in liberal circles myself. Let's shoot for a more centrist approach, whether you are liberal or conservative. If she expects the world to cater to her specifications, goes to -100 if she gets catty about it too. You meet her parents for the first time and it turns out you and her father look nearly identical. Gossipers. You never really know if you can trust them. Therefore, closeness and sentiment are not possible. Girls who have poor hygiene regardless of their looks. Inability or unwillingness to communicate, to discuss current situations, to try and understand what is going on in the relationship, romantic or not. The only way to find common ground and to understand each other is through communication. If you are not willing to do that, I can't keep investing my emotions in you. I don't know how Reddit will interpret this, but my biggest turnoff is if a girl says she used to party a lot. Like, I understand you're a party girl, but nothing is less attractive than bragging about how much crazy stuff you have done in your past. That includes all the drugs and sex that you had. Sorry, I'm not interested. Smoking cigarettes kills it for me. Verbal diarrhea. Being cruel to waiters and waitresses. Acting like they are beneath her. Instant turnoff. Cruelty to animals, to strangers, to service people, etc. Nothing is more unattractive to me than that. Horse girls. Guys who have dated horse girls will know exactly what I mean. All that crap they say about horse girls is true. You will be the third most important thing to her, behind her horse and her daddy's money. Not saying every girl who is in the equestrian scene is like this, but I have yet to be proven wrong. Horse girls are insane too. Any girl that makes me carry the conversation. Unfortunately, I think this is how I ended up with a wife that never knows when to hush. If she owns a freaking horse, all she will talk about is the freaking horse. All she will do in her spare time is brush the horse. You will schedule your vacations around the horse. You will end up paying for the horse. No. Run away. Lack of grammar. Her referring to herself as a princess. What if she really is in the royal line of succession? If she wants kids. Might be the only one here who thinks this, but when it's obvious a girl had to go some lengths to take a picture solely for Instagram, that crap turns me off and I find it extremely superficial. Shallow. Appears vapid or unintelligent or smokes. Those are my big three. Whining. Everyone's life is hard. Complaining and whining about it makes you look like an 8-year-old little girl who can't handle anything in life. Unfortunately, my wife and her 58-year-old mother haven't seemed to figure that out. If she ever uses the phrase lady boner, lower back tattoos. Low confidence is the single most destructive trait for someone trying to be attractive. I loathe women that talk crap about themselves and think that they're not great. She probably loathes herself a fair amount already. Source: am woman. Sometimes hate myself. Twerking. People who have instant turnoffs are kind of a turnoff for me. Quit being so judgmental. Women that like Disney way too much. A Disney movie a few times per year is fine, but you are a grown adult now. Too much makeup. Fake fingernails. What are some things that people claim happen all the time, but you've never seen? A disabled person exiting a disabled bathroom stall. Women complaining about a man holding the door for them. Where I live, everyone, male or female or otherwise, holds the door for everyone else, and I've never seen anyone angry about it. Or being shouted at by a woman on the bus or train when they offer them a seat. I've seen people say no thanks, I'm getting off the next stop, but I've never seen anyone get shouted at for it. I've never even heard of this. I like to think of myself as a gentleman. I would offer my seat to anyone, regardless of gender. If that person started shouting at me, I wouldn't know how to react. Based on what I was told growing up, I really expected there to be a lot more random strangers offering me free drugs. Flat Earth. Never discussed with people who believe in Flat Earth. It's hard for me to believe this ignorance still exists. Know a guy who is serious about it. Also thinks giants once walked the earth, and all sorts of other fun stuff. Lately, he's mixed his newfound religious leanings in there too, so anyone telling him otherwise is a servant of Baal, or whatever that means. He's actually a decent dude, or at least was, and I didn't even mind all the kook theories so much before he got all militant about it. Well, there is sufficient evidence to suggest there were significant height differences between some tribes of people, some of whom were much larger than we are today and would have been giants to some of our shorter ancestors, not to mention some hobbit-sized humans as well. That said, it sounds more like he's talking about the angelic Nephilim 5-story tall variety, not just the holy crap that guy's like 9 feet tall kind. Always a treat talking to people who almost completely disembark from the logical train of thought. I live in Florida and work at a hotel on the beach. In all the years I've lived and worked here, I have never seen a whale. Apparently they're all over and swim up and down the coast all the time. I've never seen one. They mostly stay under the water. No, they glide above the water but are blue so they blend in with the ocean. Source: am Floridian. And then everyone stood up and clapped. The closest I ever got to this was on a job search. A company emailed me that they found my resume on Monster and were very interested in meeting to discuss an opportunity in their office. Would I be available this Thursday at 10 a.m. to meet with Scott? Absolutely. So I show up at 10 a.m., a girl rides up the elevator with me and gets off on the same floor. We both walked into the same door, the receptionist greeted us, and the girl said, "I'm here to meet with Scott." I thought, well, that's a little weird, but maybe she's super early. The receptionist looks at me and I said, "I'm also here to meet with Scott. I have a 10 a.m. She escorted us to this conference room where I see 30 other people. Now, my alarms are starting to go off. She tells us to find seats and watch the presentation. Scott will be in shortly. So, sitting there in silence for 15 minutes before I finally lean over to the girl and ask, "What job are you interviewing for?" She answered, I'm not entirely certain. I asked, "Well, what's on your resume? What job did you think you were being offered?" She answered, "I'm a mechanical engineer. You?" "I'm a software developer." So another 5 minutes go by when Scott walks into the room. He's super excited to see us, and this presentation will take about an hour. He's asking people their names and making an effort to use their names whenever possible as he's handing out copies of the PowerPoint slides. Tells us that we can take notes. I start flipping through the slide deck and notice right away that all of the slides are either blank or otherwise devoid of content. They might have a title on them, but the title is just words. No explanation whatsoever. Things like company history and compensation, but otherwise empty. He tells us that there will be time after the presentation to ask questions, but in order to get done before lunch, he requests that all questions are held until the end of the presentation. "Scott?" I said. "I do have a quick question before we get started. There will be plenty of time after the presentation for all questions." "Scott, I promise that this question will be quick and very relevant. Are all the positions available commissioned insurance sales?" "Well, we are an insurance company." "That's not what I asked, Scott. Are all the positions available commissioned insurance sales?" "Well, yes." I stood up and gathered up my resume and folder and said, "Thanks for wasting my time, Scott," and I walked toward the door. Scott rushed to beat me to the door and opened the side closest to me, causing me to pause briefly. As I did, I heard a great deal of grumbling and paper shuffling behind me. I turned to look, and literally everybody in the room except for 4 dudes in 3-piece suits at the front of the room had stood up at their tables and were putting their stuff in their briefcases and notebooks. I exited quickly enough that I got the elevator to myself, but looking back on it, I should have waited because I definitely want to know what their elevator conversation was. Oh my god, this exact same thing happened to me with H&R Block. I applied for a receptionist position on Indeed, and they called me in for an interview. I get there, and they were close to 30 of us in one room, and all they did was talk about hiring tax people and showed a PowerPoint on getting licensed and needing us to take their $400 tax course, which I was 1000% not interested in. I asked if there was even a receptionist position open. She said, "We're accepting resumes for it." About half of us left after that announcement because we had applied for the receptionist position, which didn't exist. Winning the top slot machine progressive jackpot at the casino. They say it happens regularly, but I've never seen it or met anyone who has actually won it. You only have to ensure that a payout on the machine will occur at a specified frequency for every prize possible, i.e. if a payout of $5 has a 50-to-1 chance, it has to occur on average 1 in 50 times. As such, you're allowed machines that only pay out the jackpot 1 in 10 trillion times, so long as you can prove that it would eventually occur with that frequency. I did some digging, and now I know that China wants to regulate lockboxes/loot boxes in online games such as Overwatch. Blizzard needs to show the Chinese government the exact math behind any drop chance. It's actually good, I think. A trans person trying to spy on or assault me in the bathroom. Ditto. Though honestly, I'm not sure I'd notice a trans guy in the men's room. It's not like we pay much attention to anyone in there. I haven't seen any of the "OMG, they're out to get us" people present a single bit of evidence that this has happened anywhere, ever. And you'd think logically it would have happened once, but nothing anywhere. Meanwhile, there's plenty of evidence of trans people being assaulted by cis people in both the women's and men's room, and cis women being harassed out of the women's room because they were a bit butch and were assumed to be trans. It's almost like it got nothing to do with the actual safety and everything to do with trying to stop trans people from ever leaving the house. Someone is being made fun of/talked about negatively at the gym. 5-time weekly gym goer for 10 plus years and have never seen it. And I always wear only one headphone while listening to a book, so it's not like I wouldn't hear it if it happened. My gym buddies are some of the nicest people I've ever met. Just happens that they're also in the 1,000 pound club. For me, it's vegans bringing up being vegan all the time. I have vegan friends, and you'd never know that they were vegan until you notice they don't eat any meat products. I was vegetarian for a couple of years, and I was out eating with a group of people. One of them wanted me to try their burrito, which had beef or chicken in it. All I said was, "No thanks, I don't eat meat." This person was absolutely shocked. I then listened to a 10-minute rant about how meat is so good and vegetarians are ridiculous because they only do it for attention. They're always shoving it in your face and judging people who eat meat, all because I politely declined a burrito. Yep, you just mentioned that you don't eat meat and suddenly they feel the need to justify themselves. Like, sorry if you're insecure about your choices, dude, but don't pull me into it. People being rude to breastfeeding mothers in public. Anytime I see a nursing mother, everyone is very supportive. A friend of mine was terrified by a screaming crazy woman who followed her around a mall in Florida because my friend was feeding her daughter in public. Scared the hell out of her. I'm amazed nobody said anything to the crazy lady. I feel like such an over-the-top reaction would cause someone to defend the person being harassed, but that could just be me. I have yet to see a guy get into a bar fight and take out an entire gang with cue sticks. I've never met a guy who's single because he was too nice, and everyone who has said that to me has been either creepy or turned into mega douches once you show them a tiny bit of kindness. Often people that say that they are too nice are often fooling themselves or completely delusional. More often than not, they're a total asshole. The nicest guys I know have never had any trouble finding a date or sustaining relationships, nor do they consider themselves nice. In contrast, guys who blame their lack of romantic success on being nice aren't actually nice. Rather, they're guys with generally ugly thoughts or beliefs who take pains to not show it. They think that by not giving voice to their ugly thoughts, beliefs, or demands, they're being nice, and while I'm a guy, I have a feeling that women can immediately see through that facade. You can be truly nice and not have luck with women if there are other variables involved, deep shyness, poor hygiene, etc. All I'm saying is that from my experience, niceness by itself is simply not an explanatory variable for poor romantic luck. It's a cop-out to blame it. UFOs. You'll encounter a lot of UFOs if you suck at identifying flying objects. Hey, what was that? I don't know. It was either a bird or a bat, or I couldn't tell. UFO sighting. Walking in on my parents going at it. I mean, I learned to knock on doors before entering. Quit your knocking, get some life experience on ya. No, let him stay. The boy must learn. Never seen a neckbeard and fedora on the same person. Our community colleges have plenty. Yeah, seriously, take 2 computer science classes and you'll see enough to last you a lifetime. Cow tipping. This is what I searched the thread for. Total myth. Funny how adamant some people are that it exists, but they've never done it. But they insist their friends have. There are a few first-hand reports, but it's amazing how even here people are saying they know someone else who did it. My summer camp did have to ban snipe hunting after some kids caught one. They showed up with an opossum in a pillowcase. Literally nobody has asked me out, ever. I'm a girl. Not unattractive. Last year of uni. I do ask other people out, just it's never happened the other way around. Anyone claiming to be triggered or needing a safe space in a non-ironic or mocking manner, people with PTSD can be triggered. Everyone seems to fantasize about what they'd do if an armed burglar broke into their house in the middle of the night, but that is ridiculously unlikely unless you live in a really bad neighborhood. Real burglars wait until nobody is home, or they think nobody is home but one kid missed his flight. The only person I know who was ever robbed in the middle of the night when he was home was this guy who was showing off his gun collection at a party and bragging about what he'd do if an intruder broke in, and the next night people broke in and took his guns. We used to live in a really crappy neighborhood when I was a kid. Got burgled in the middle of the night more than once. The most memorable one was the night that they did our house over while my older brother, he would have been like 18 or so, was visiting and had slept on the couch. They stole the TV and VCR that were sitting no more than 5 feet in front of him while he slept. I remember waking up to hear him asking Mom if she'd put the TV away in the night, and when she said no in a puzzled voice, he said, "Well then I think we must have been burgled." He was all calm about it until he realized that they'd pinched his half-full packet of Winfield Reds as well. My wife was traveling through Hungary on a train. She was in a sleeper car with another woman and her kids. Before they all got to bed, my wife asks if it was okay if she locks the door with her bike lock. The other lady gives her a weird look but says fine. Wife locks the door. The next morning, they wake up to people in the next car screaming. Wife and other lady listen by the door and figure out that burglars came into the train during the night and stole people's luggage, plus stole wedding rings off of people's fingers while they slept. The woman in my wife's car went wide-eyed and gave my wife a big hug. I've never seen a shoplifter getting caught. With all the time I've spent in stores throughout daily life over the years, I figured I'd see it by now. Either the shoplifters are that good or store loss prevention is that bad. Or I live in an honest town. My sister used to work at Target in high school, and they had multiple shoplifters that they caught. Most of the time, she said the shoplifters just complied with orders and nothing got too loud or anything. Only once something big happened, and the security guard at the place got bit by a woman shoplifting. And then the next day, the woman came back to the store and got arrested. Why would you go back? You bit someone. How do you think they won't recognize you? Trees falling in the woods. Baby pigeons. I have seen thousands of adult pigeons, but never a baby pigeon. It's like they just spawn like full-grown pigeons. I acquired a pigeon colony for a while due to my unwillingness to kill things. It all started because a pigeon couple laid eggs on my patio, and before the babies could fly, there would be new eggs. And local bird rescue places were like, we won't take pigeon eggs. It took a year and a half for there to be a gap for me to deal with the situation properly. They even laid eggs all winter. But yeah, they definitely make babies, and they are really ugly and make a sound that is almost like screaming. Someone with a new iPhone and 5 kids buys steak and lobster with their food stamp card and then drive away in their Escalade. An undocumented worker taking a wanted American job. Millennials who have been damaged by PC culture. I guess you've never heard the console peasants bashing, eh? Thanks to PC culture, consoles have gotten progressively more expensive and unnecessarily powerful. The human eye can't see past 24 frames per second. Why the hell are we paying for 60 frames per second now? And 4K? We can't resolve more than 1080p. This PC culture can go to hell. Past the PS2 consoles are just ridiculous wastes of money. That they stayed in a haunted house and witnessed objects inexplicably moving, or sounds with no source. I don't buy it. Finding money. I found a $20 bill floating in the water at the beach once. 8-year-old me thought I was the richest guy alive. Drug dealers giving the drugs out for free the first time. Meeting Bill Murray. Kind of a stretch, but not once have I met a person named Muhammad. With it being the most popular name in the world, statistics say I should have at least met one, right? The name is super popular where it originates. Because of this, most people choose to go by their middle name. This is what my professor does. My professor has 2 brothers. All 3 of them have the same first and last names. Please don't blast me for this. Catcalling. I've never seen someone get catcalled. None of my friends have ever catcalled, and I've never catcalled. I've lived in 2 major metro areas and a rural area. I totally believe that it happens, and it shouldn't, but my girlfriends tell me they get catcalled daily. I live in the US. I'm sure it's worse in other areas. In my experience, I only get catcalled when I am on my own and not in crowds, so it doesn't surprise me that some men don't witness it very often. Women getting mad at men when talking to a child in public. I always see people talk about it on here, and I'm sure that it has happened. But as a fellow dude, I've never been given a strange look or bashed at for waving at a kid or interacting with them in public. The trickle-down effect when it comes to wealth. Saving 15% or more on car insurance with Geico. When I switched my bike insurance from Progressive to Geico, it legitimately went from like $120 to $34 a month. I'm 70% sure that somebody at Geico made a major clerical error, but I'm rolling with it. I have never seen a person in real life get upset at someone for saying Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. Life gets better. Nobody I know who does CrossFit talks about it any more than people who really enjoy working out, but aren't in CrossFit. If anything, the woman I know who runs marathons talks about her workouts way more than anyone else. People who watch Big Bang Theory. Supposedly, it's one of the highest rated TV shows, though I've never met anyone who would admit to watching it. The keyword there is admit. Rodents of unusual size. A true miracle happening. Not the kind of, found my keys, thank God, but the one special the smaller Christian community tells you about. I read and hear so often about people having broken legs or arms repaired, but it always starts with my brother told me or a friend saw this happening. I'm sitting on the bus and I laughed out loud at this comment and everyone stared at me. I've never seen anyone laughing to themselves and thought that they were insane. Original questions on Ask Reddit. I've been an atheist for most of my life, and I've met a lot of other atheists who complain about Christians trying to shove religion down their throats. I honestly have never once had anybody try to convert me to Christianity. Stray cats and dogs on the street just waiting to be taken to a loving home, but you see them pretty regularly on r/ah. I've never met a strange cat that obviously wasn't already owned, or an absolute bruiser of an alley cat that won't even come near a human no matter how much you chase after them with treats. I have a stray cat that hangs out at my house all the time. She's been here every day for about 3 years now. One of my wife's friends is on Facebook claiming that people think women who have had a C-section haven't really given birth or aren't real mothers. I've never heard anyone say that, and I've heard a lot of stupid things in my time. I've never seen a newborn baby sleep through the night. Although lots of women claim that their baby was the best baby, he or she slept through the night from the first night we brought them home from the hospital. That's a lie and you know it. Stop trying to make yourself look better than other moms. Babies are trapped in darkness in utero. They don't have daytime/nighttime worked out yet. Plus, newborns have to eat every 2 to 3 hours in the beginning, damn it. I honestly think at some point we go into autopilot. There have been mornings where I woke up and was confused because I thought my son slept through the night and my husband was like, nope, you got up with him and held him and wouldn't let me help you. I've never known or heard of anyone actually winning one of those Publishers Clearinghouse giant checks. Political poll taking. I'm over 50 and have never been asked about who or what I would vote for. I have asked around and no one I know has ever been asked. So where do they get those poll results? Who do they ask? I've been polled twice, and I'm 30. I held a membership to a political party from 18 to 27. I refused to be a part of it after a decision they made on some policies. Based on the cartoons and Western movies, I expected that quicksand would have been a much bigger issue as an adult. Someone winning more than a free order of fries, pie, or drink from the McDonald's Monopoly game. I somehow expect to be downvoted for this, but ghosts and paranormal events. My neighbor is freaking psycho when it comes to it. Listen, maybe ghosts are real. You never know, and there is probably no way to prove if they do or don't, but I guarantee all those paranormal things she and many have happened to them are bullcrap. I've seen many even use this to make them feel special. Oh, I'm very in tune with the dead. Spirits are all around us. Lady, something fell off the shelf. No, a ghost didn't knock it off. You're not being haunted. I'm not knocking every event that has happened to some people, but I'm positive many are overreacting. After learning about sleep paralysis and all of the crazy crap people can see and hear during episodes, my belief in paranormal activities has dramatically decreased. Those national polls. I've never once been polled for anything. After having been to haunted homes, hotels, etc., they killed my childhood fascination with the paranormal. So thanks guys, you can stop with the witching rods and flashlight gimmicks. Traditionally speaking, if it's owned and operated by a person, it's not haunted. I went to Hell's Gate in New Jersey, and while I can't say it was haunted, it was utterly terrifying. People not being mad after they say, "Be 100% honest, I promise I won't get mad." I hold doors open for women and men all the time. No woman has ever given me a feminist rant. Despite the dire warnings of the DARE officer back in elementary school, I got through my entire school career without a single person trying to pressure me into smoking pot. My husband cleaning the house. Lawyer up. Old people being nice and young adults being rude. Never see it, but I see the opposite all the time. Pregnant Asian. I'm convinced the babies are grown in rice fields. LOL. Last year, when I finished up my contract in China, roughly 1 in 3 of my female coworkers were pregnant. One-child law had just become the two-child law. Meeting anti-vaccine people. 26 years on this planet and have never once met a single person who believed in not vaccinating their children, and that even includes social media. Yet people make it sound like it's such a significant and polarizing issue. Guys, I'm flattered you're all responsive to my post, LOL, but I get it. They do certainly exist, and some of you have met some. I suppose it's just a vocal minority group, and since I don't have children and don't often associate with people with children, that probably limits my interactions with these people. My cousin doesn't vaccinate her kids, and her youngest has Down syndrome. He's been in and out of the hospital so many times, and he's not even a year and a half old. He gets illnesses in his lungs easily because his muscles aren't as strong as a child without Downs. This is what I've been told. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just can't imagine why she's putting all 4 of her kids' health at risk for diseases that can kill them. Especially his health, since he's the least able to fight any of it off. It pisses me off to no end. Muslims are Middle Eastern people plotting against the USA and the US citizens. As a university student and an employee of a large hospital, 99% of people from different countries or cultures are always extremely nice, and it's the Americans that are huge jerks. Especially the Americans in the 40+ range. I get talked down more by middle-aged American women than I do very well-educated doctors who are not American. That says a lot to me. Adding on to this, the people who believe that Dearborn is a hotbed of jihad activity with the active no-go zones for non-Muslims. I grew up in Metro Detroit, worked in Dearborn for many years, and know many people who live there and have never seen any ounce of real proof to support these claims. I live in London and have never been harassed for drinking alcohol or seen any Sharia zones. Relationships. A no smoking within 50 feet of an entrance rule actually working. People on welfare buying lobster at the grocery store and then getting into a Lexus in the parking lot or similar. I've never seen it ever. I don't know about you guys, but I've never even seen quicksand. Participation trophies. I'm a child of the 90s and was a very non-athletic kid who was forced into sports. I was a prime candidate for getting a participation trophy. I've never gotten one and never seen one. I've spent around 25 years in the automotive field, mostly with new car dealers. I was 13 years with Ford and the other 12 years with Honda, Volvo, Nissan, Buick, and Polaris. I've worked in all areas including parts, service, and sales. In all my life, I've never seen a coworker rip off or try to rip off any customer. I've also never ripped off a customer. Have you ever seen an Asian in a wheelchair? I haven't. A popped or blown tire on a vehicle. When I bought my most recent vehicle, I was asked if I wanted to purchase the package for tire protection, to which I replied no. My family and friends were shocked that I didn't, because apparently puncturing a tire is pretty normal. I've never seen it, nor have I had it happen to me after 15 years of driving. You've never seen someone changing a tire on the side of the road? I've only been driving 6 years, and I must have seen that 24 times. Child Protective Services unjustly stealing children from perfectly good parents. I've seen it. My aunt hated my auntie Loretta because Loretta wouldn't take care of her. They're both grown women. So my aunt planted evidence in Loretta's house and called CPS. Got the kids taken away, but luckily my auntie Loretta was able to prove it was planted. Dating somebody for their personality. Every couple I've ever met, it's clear why they're together, and it's never because one of them is just so funny. Physical attractiveness, socioeconomic status, and reasonably close priorities and values are why people get together. No personality overcomes shortcomings in those areas. So true. My fiancé has a fantastic personality, but I didn't notice that the first time I saw him at a crowded bar. Woman with the name Ladasha. Unsurprisingly, my friends who lean conservative always know someone who totally had an experience with a Ladasha, and then they go on to complain about how stupid the name is. It's a myth from an old chain letter. Yeah, I looked it up once. I just think it's interesting how often people are like, no, I know someone who met someone named Ladasha, without thinking for 1 second that their friend might be full of crap. Foreigners or refugees stealing our jobs and/or harassing everyone. Muslims. Right-wing people are always talking about the Muslims coming in here and being everywhere and all that, but I've only ever met like 3 Muslims in my entire life, and 2 of those people I only met once at a mosque. The other was a classmate in high school. I live in a fairly diverse area. There is a big Muslim community here, and I have quite a few Muslim friends and acquaintances. I think it's important to remember that Islam is a religion and not a race, so you can't always pinpoint who is Muslim unless it's made obvious or they tell you. Millennials who are supposed to be these whining, underachieving people. My kids are millennials and they are mostly tough as nails, and I should add it all comes from them. Christian persecution in the US. What's a fake fact that you believed for a long time? That fish would get scared and swim away if you talked while fishing. Turns out my dad just wanted me to shut up. Wait, really? Yeah, I read an article in a French magazine and they tested to see if it made a difference. I don't remember the specifics because it's been a few years, but the conclusion was that the fish didn't care if you were talking. Loud noises like banging the hull of your boat would scare them away though. I was homeschooled up until the 6th grade. Every time my family ever drove past cows, Dad would point at them and say, "Oh look, American short-necked giraffes." 6th grade rolls around and I smugly correct the teacher in class, saying she should use the proper name, American short-necked giraffe. I was incorrect. Thanks a lot, Dad. When I was a kid, I thought all the photos that barbers hung up of their kids at their stations were pictures of their best customers. I would always try to be as still as possible while they were cutting my hair in hopes of getting my picture taken. Semi-related, but I used to sit really still in the car and try to blink as little as possible to convince people driving by that I was a garden statue, so they'd think my mom was weird for buckling a statue in a car seat. I've done the same thing, hoping and believing a little that people would think that maybe my parents just had a really realistic figure of a child in the front seat. My mom for years convinced me that any black or purple colored sweets were horrible and that I didn't like them. I do like them. They were just her favorites. Also, for about 5 years, she told me she was 28. My brother once told me that the white/clear gummy bears were actually drugs and that I shouldn't eat them. I was probably 6 or 7. I was also puzzled by the existence of drugstores because drugs are bad and illegal. In my country, drug is never used to mean medicine, and I wondered why they were allowed if it was known they sold drugs. Can confirm, I thought the same. We call drugstores chemists in New Zealand. Same with gas stations. I always got confused because you get petrol, which is a liquid, not a gas. Took me way too long to realize the word spawned from the word gasoline. Dad replaced my dead goldfish with a betta fish and told me that the goldfish turned into betta fish instead of telling me the damn fish died. Hey son, you know your goldfish was feeling ill? Well, he got beta. When I was a kid, my mom told me that if you drove with the interior lights on, you would get pulled over and given a ticket, or if you honked the horn. My mom told me that if the car went over 70, it would explode. I believed her until I started driving and had to explain to my impatient friends why I couldn't go any faster. That bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly, but do. I thought that Lenin and Lenin were the same person for years, certainly until high school. I blame my parents for this, who talked about both in our house, so I didn't see their names written down. The tasting map of the tongue. In fairness, everyone believed it at the time, so I don't know if that counts. I remember being taught it in school in the early 1990s. I've just read, and apparently it was discredited in the 1970s, but I was being taught it in the mid-2000s. When I was a kid, swallowing gum will mean it stays in your stomach for 7 years. My sister believed until she was a full-blown adult that Alaska was an island because on maps that display the United States, it's always separated from Hawaii. Fun fact, my sister is now a very well-educated 6th grade teacher and has vowed that she will prevent future absurdities of this nature. That reindeer were mythical. I had only ever heard them in the context of Santa and the other Christmas creatures, so I just assumed they were fake too. I thought males can only release sperm 2 times in their entire lifetime, because of the 2 balls. Man, was I wrong. My father somehow convinced me that the brown UPS delivery trucks were called broccoli trucks. No, they didn't deliver broccoli, they delivered packages. No, they were not associated with broccoli in any way at all. So why were they called broccoli trucks? Damned if I know. Dad logic. I learned the truth about things far later than I should have. In middle school, actually, when I offhandedly remarked that I'd seen a broccoli truck in the parking lot, my teacher overheard me and asked me to point it out, then gave me a look of skeptical confusion when I indicated the UPS truck. That was the moment when I realized my dad might have made up the whole broccoli truck bit. I wound up trying to explain that it was a family tradition to refer to delivery vehicles by odd names, but everything I said only seemed to make my teacher grow more suspicious. Upon hearing the story from me, my father did a very poor job of restraining his laughter. My mom convinced me and my sibling that ice cream trucks were actually just music trucks. They go around the neighborhoods in the summer playing music for everyone to hear. Isn't that delightful? Until my aunt offered to buy us ice cream from the truck one day while she was watching us and blew my mom's cover. We never asked to buy ice cream before then, but now we knew. When my parents got home, we were excited to tell them that the music truck sells ice cream too. My parents told my brother and I that the music on the ice cream trucks only played when they were sold out. They just didn't want kids to waste their time running to an empty truck, hence the music. Deoxygenated blood is blue. My teacher couldn't convince us because she was really rude in explaining it. Oh dang, did we have the same teacher? Mine asked which color deoxygenated blood is, and I piped up and said blue. Then she said only people that don't know anything about science would believe something like that. How was I supposed to know? We were only in the 6th grade. My face got really red and I didn't say anything in that class for the rest of the year. Komodo dragons have septic bites. Turns out they're just venomous. Lame. Sharks don't get cancer. Well, they do. Cancer doesn't discriminate. To be fair, when that was being said, there were not any recorded cases of shark cancer. I literally thought goats were boys and sheep were girls until about 3 months ago. I'm 33. That you could see the Great Wall of China from space. I mean, with satellites I can see my house from space, so it's not completely false. Bonsai Kitten. For those of you unfamiliar, there was a website called Bonsai Kitten that photoshopped cats into strange-shaped jars and containers. The site stated that they put them in as kittens, and their bodies grew into the shapes of the container due to the confined space that they were trapped in. This is the earliest example of internet trolling that I fell for. I reported the site to PETA, which I also believed in, and posted it to all of my friends on MySpace to try and get the horrible monsters behind the service brought to justice. After a few months, I learned that it was a fake site created just to cause shock value, and I never once believed another thing I saw on the internet at face value. It honestly shaped the way I perceive the world through the internet. Never again will I actually believe something without well-documented sources, and even with sources, I remain skeptical. You swallow 8 spiders per year. That cracking your knuckles was somehow bad for your joints and could lead to arthritis. Turns out my grandma just thought it was annoying. That's not just your grandma. That was a pretty commonly believed thing for a while. I still hear plenty of people say that. When I was a kid, I thought the help wanted signs in the store windows were encouraging us to provide aid to outlaws. I thought the no minors sign on the liquor store window meant that minors couldn't come in because they were dirty and or wasted. I was horrified to see a whites only sign on a tennis court fence. For way too long, I thought that drinking and driving literally meant drinking any kind of beverage while driving. I thought my dad was constantly breaking the law while driving and drinking soda. My cousin told me that if you swallowed a watermelon seed, you would have watermelons grow inside of you, and you would die if they got too big. That freaked me out for the longest time, and I refused to eat watermelons. That there was this one person I'm destined to be with. The sky was blue because it was reflecting the ocean. When I was little, I thought that whenever a song was on the radio, that singer was in the studio singing it live at that exact time. I thought that too. I would always get confused when a song would play on 2 stations at once, so I assumed that there were 2 different microphones, one for each station. That the giant turkey legs you get at the Renaissance Fair were actually eagle legs, since turkeys don't grow that big. Someone told me that, and I believed it for years, until I got curious and decided to Google it. Turns out I didn't even have my fake fact right. The original made-up story claimed that they were emu legs, but in actuality, they are just turkey. Using only 10% of my brain. In elementary school, some kid told me if I don't take a crap at least once a day, then my body will explode. When I was younger, the concept of electricity was extremely difficult for me. Up until the age of maybe 10 or 11, I thought that electricity was just some made-up word adults used for things they didn't understand. I thought there was an entire species of little people that actually were the brains behind this electricity thing. There was a little man inside my pencil sharpener that would manually sharpen my pencil with his knife. The same went for traffic lights. A little person in there switching the lights. Cars, washing machines, everything had a factory inside of them of little people doing everything by hand. I thought chameleons changed color as camouflage. They change color according to temperature and other factors. My entire life is a lie. Camouflage is still part of it, just not the only or even the main part. That I would get sick if my feet got too cold or wet. I thought my grandma knew everything, so even after I learned about the immune system, I still believed her. Eventually, I put 2 and 2 together, but it took me longer than I care to admit. Columbus was a cool guy. I'm half Native American, and I had a friend in kindergarten who was also half Native American, so of course our parents let us in on the secret when they found out we were learning about him. Apparently my friend and I found a book with cut-in-half Native Americans, and went to the front of the class, opened to the said page with the dead Indians, and said, "Look what they did to us," in front of about 25-year-olds. So about at least 20 children were aware that Columbus was not a cool guy. Haha. When we were kids, my parents would drive us from California to Utah to visit relatives. I was 6, my brother was 5. One time we approached the California border, there was a checkpoint where you had to stop. They would ask if you had any fruit in your car. My parents always told us it was a checkpoint where they confiscated children, so we'd sit in the back seat under a blanket fearing for our lives. I kinda love my parents for this cruel and unusual trick. Until my late teenage years, I thought the forefathers were the 4 fathers, as in the ones on Mount Rushmore. That urine is sterile. Once I became a nurse and thought about it, duh, of course it isn't. Also, that going out in the cold with wet hair can make you sick. American interstate highways, by law, are required to have sections of a dead straightaway with no overpasses at prescribed intervals so they can be used to land fighter jets. It's true that the interstate highways were built as a defense imperative. Their full name is the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. But there are a lot of bad urban legends out there about fighter jets landing on them, and there being laws tailoring the design to accommodate that mission. It's simply not true. I'm Swedish, and we have some parts of the highways built to be able to be used as an airbase in case of war. I just believed that every country did that, and it made so much sense for America to do such a thing. And now the USA doesn't? Pineapples were a subterranean fruit, with only the green leaves protruding from the surface, like a carrot. Until way later than I'd like to admit, I believed if I watched too much TV, my pupils would turn into squares. Thanks, Mom. I grew up in Hawaii, and when I asked my dad where the black sand came from, he told me about underwater dynamite explosions. What a dumb thing to tell a kid. It actually comes from the volcanic activity on the Big Island. I just recently learned that craisins aren't just crazy raisins. They're cranberry raisins. They also don't make muffin tops by cutting the tops off of muffins and throwing the bottoms out. I'm 21. That it's illegal to pick your state's official flower. Here in California, a lot of people believe it's against the law to pick California poppies. It's not. They're wildflowers, which is one notch above weeds. I thought the black market was like a bazaar, with folding tables and chairs with people trying to sell illegal goods. I loved history, especially Rome, when I was a kid and was well into Age of Empires, etc. Was also kind of a picky eater and refused to eat tomatoes one time, so my dad told me that if I were Roman, I'd have to eat tomatoes because the ancient Romans ate them all the time. I believed him and got them down, and gradually got over my thing with tomatoes. It wasn't until years later that I found out why that wasn't possible, but I think it was a good call. Dad also got me to eat mushrooms one time by telling me the Vikings always ate them before battles, which I guess might be a little true. A group of raccoons is called a business. that drop bears exist. Damn you, the Australian tradition of making things up as a culture. Drop bears do exist. The myth is that they don't. And the history behind that is actually incredibly ironic. Drop bears, as every Australian knows, fall somewhere between pest and predator on the list of their many faunas. While they mainly stay in trees outside of city limits, there are frequent reports of them appearing in populated areas, and the damage they can do when dropping onto unsuspecting passerby, hence their name, is potentially devastating. In order to combat this, and to increase tourism, the Australian government commissioned the creation of drop bear repellent. After the product first became available, a few different companies started marketing their own varieties, and one advertising attempt stipulated that after using their repellent, customers would come to believe that drop bears weren't real. As it happened, the spray was incredibly effective, and many tourists left the country without ever having seen a drop bear. It spawned a rumor that the repellent was a tongue-in-cheek method of fleecing foreigners. With Australian national pride being what it is, the claim that drop bears didn't exist became a countrywide meme of sorts. It got a little bit out of control. Nowadays, there are actually teams of people devoted to perpetuating the myth that drop bears aren't real. If you search on Wikipedia, for instance, you'll often see that their article has been altered to list the species as fictitious, and it's actually a felony to photograph them. Granted, there's that excuse that flashbulbs were damaging to their eyes somehow, but the law remains unchanged in the digital era. As a result, most of the world genuinely believes that drop bears don't exist. At least it means that the repellent works, if nothing else. That yawning while you were sick was bad for you. Whenever I was feeling bad, I would make sure to hide my yawns from my mom. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure why I originally even got that idea in my head. Cuban cigars are illegal in the US because they have weed in them. If your teacher doesn't show up after 15 minutes, you are allowed to leave. Growing up in Virginia, my 4th grade teacher tried to tactfully explain the state's namesake by lying and saying that a virgin is someone who's never been married. That summer, while standing over his dead sister's grave, I asked my crying grandpa if his younger sister died a virgin. Reverse pandas. I read a book once that turned out to be totally false, and it basically said pandas reverse colors when they're struck by lightning. I got in a shouting match at work about it. I would be able to do whatever I wanted when I grew up. I thought Jean-Paul Gaultier invented the JPEG for years. That if you sneeze with your eyes open, they'll pop out of your head. I used to believe the tongue map was real because I saw it in a health book. I would always try to put candy on different parts of my tongue to test it out. A duck's quack doesn't echo. That microwaves heat your food from the inside out. Apparently not, and it took until college until I realized. I believed that everything used to be black and white. Where do I begin? The Earth is only about 6,000 to 10,000 years old. It's actually about 4,500,000,000 years old. The pyramids were built by Hebrew slaves. In reality, the Egyptians didn't rely much on slave labor at all, and there's no evidence to suggest that Hebrews made up any significant portion of slaves in Egypt during that time. There is scientific proof that a worldwide flood occurred in Earth's history. No such evidence exists. Explorers found what they believed to be the remains of Noah's Ark on a mountain. It was the remnants of an ancient boat, but nowhere near big enough to be the Ark of myth, and not even from the correct historical cultural region. It was likely an old boat that someone disassembled and used its parts to build a shelter. You can't create something from nothing. This argument only stems from a fractal misunderstanding of the term nothing, which corrupts your ability to comprehend the concept from the ground up. Life cannot be created from scratch. Turns out it's actually quite simple, but the results would take millions of years to manifest. So it's not something you can just do in a high school science fair. The basic building blocks of life are easy enough to find, and it doesn't take much to get the process going. It's evolution. So it just takes a prolonged trial and error. And by prolonged, I mean millions of years. It wasn't until last week that I found out you can balance eggs any time of the year, not just equinoxes. My dad had a mustache in his wedding photos. He told me it was his fake mustache for formal events. Why would I not believe him? I'm 4 years older than my sister, and when I was 8, I told her that sweat was actually urine coming through your skin. That's why it smelled bad and tasted funny. My sister believed this, and would even tell others this until about 12 years old when she was called out about it. She came home and hated me for about a week. She cried. It is great being an older brother. That Obama was a Muslim. It's interesting because whenever I said this, people thought I didn't like him because of it. I've always liked Obama, and I would even point to him as an example that not all Muslims were bad. So many of these facts are just made up by adults to get kids to shut up. That American women get paid less than American men for the same job. That it is illegal in the US to kill a praying mantis. That I couldn't play Nintendo 64 on the big screen TV because it would ruin the screen. Believed it for my whole childhood. Turns out my parents just didn't want me to monopolize the big screen. Organic food is healthier and/or tastes better. When I was a child, I would see black and white movies and assume that it took a while for humanity to invent color, and before then, the world was black and white. That Pluto was a planet. That glass is a slow-moving liquid, told by my high school science teacher. Vaccinations caused autism. Thanks for that one, Dad. I thought Hitler was a transparent ghost guy for a long time when I was a kid. I don't know where I picked that up. When I was a kid and watched a TV show that began with "viewer discretion is advised," I thought it meant that I had to be discreet when and if I ever told anyone I had watched it. That palm trees aren't trees. They are actually bushes. That camels store water in their humps. Nope. Cow tipping isn't a thing people do. Always thought that that's just what some people did, but found out it's almost impossible. My mother was fine with every ethnic type except the Irish. She absolutely despised them. I'm not too sure how old I was, late teens or early 20s, when one day it dawned on me, wait, the Irish simply can't be all that bad. That doesn't make even logical sense. Reading in dim light damages your eyes. It doesn't. It doesn't damage your eyes, but it sure as hell is nicer reading with good light. My stepdad convinced me when I was like 5 or 6 that the traffic lights were controlled by a guy in a room with hundreds of monitors. Didn't figure it out until I was 11. That burnt popcorn cleans your teeth. Turns out my dad just didn't want to eat the burnt pieces at the bottom of the microwave bag of popcorn. When I was a kid, my mom would take me to a mom and pop store down the street from our house. They had a sign in the window that said, "We card anyone under 18. But I only saw the "we card" part and thought it was an actual card. My mom went in there once, and I was left with my older sister in the car, and before she left to go, I asked her to get me a "we card." It was many years later before I learned what it actually meant. My mom never made any attempt to stifle her laughter at me. I thought people had a piece of brain in their little toe for way too long. I thought it was like just in case your brain got messed up, you'd still have some brain stored in your pinky toe, just in case. My father is a programmer and mathematician. At some point in my childhood, he explained to me that pi in base 11 contains an enormous series of ones and zeros, which when arranged in a matrix will create a perfect circle. This was my go-to interesting fact for many, many years. I recently brought it up to him again, and he just stared at me dumbfounded. As it turns out, my interesting fact is actually the end of Carl Sagan's Contact. When I was a child, I was made to believe that if and when I say bad words, even under my breath, invisible frogs, bugs, and other freaky things will come out of my mouth, and they will fill up the house, even when I can't see them. Can't think of one for myself, but this reminded me of something a friend told me. Her mom was Irish and her dad was Chinese, so they convinced her not only that she was Chirish, but also that Chireland was a real country that existed. If I recall correctly, she said she cried when her 3rd grade teacher had to break the news to her. Didn't last as long as some responses I've seen in this thread, but I feel that sheer ridiculousness of it all makes it worth sharing. That CNN stood for the Communist News Network, and the word chaos was actually an acronym for Christ has all our solutions. Yeah. Your brain does not heal itself. Was taught that in grade school. Late to the post, but I believed that there was a specially bred cow that had shorter legs on one side so they could stand on a hill without falling over. I was very gullible as a kid, but I used to share this fact with my friends in school. That all dogs were boys and all cats were girls. When I was 8, I was on the school council. Someone convinced me that another school had a roller coaster in its playground. I spent every single meeting putting forward my idea of having a roller coaster. Every meeting. They didn't let me stay on the council for next year. My dad told me he was an extra in Break-In 2, Electric Boogaloo. I then told all of my friends. I thought Americans had special powers. While watching Home Alone around age 5 or 6, during the scene where Kevin is controlling all of the cardboard cutouts with strings so it looked from the outside like there's a party with a lot of people, I asked my dad, "How can he do that?" My dad replied, "Because he's American. We're British." So from that moment on, for a good few years, I thought Americans were superhumans. My 23-year-old cousin was a single mother. She had a 5-year-old son that I watched occasionally when she worked and I was off. One day he lost a tooth. The next day when she brought him over, I asked if the tooth fairy had come for his tooth. He said no and hung his head. His mother says I told him the window was closed, so she couldn't get in. I assumed she forgot and made up this excuse. It happens. The next day, I ask him. He hangs his head, no. My grown adult, 23-year-old cousin looks angry. She says we left the window open and she still didn't come. Then quietly adds if she doesn't come tonight, I'm just going to put money under his pillow myself. I somehow manage to keep a straight face as I send the boy out of the room to go watch television. Then I spend the next 20 minutes explaining to my able-to-drive and vote grown-up 23-year-old cousin that she is, in fact, the Tooth Fairy now. I decided to break Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny to her another time. That buying knockoff sunglasses can be bad for your eyes, as they're usually not UV coated, but cause your pupils to dilate, and thus cause more UV light to enter your retina. Turns out polycarbonate and most plastics filter UV light naturally. I've bought way too many expensive sunglasses because of this. Karma always catches up with people who do bad things. The truth is, plenty of people do bad things with little to no consequences. Cats have 9 lives. Boy, did I find out that I was wrong so many times. That you need to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Red cars go faster. That diamonds were rare. That I was allergic to pizza and ice cream. My mother told me that when I was very young, I had an allergy test done and it showed that I was allergic to dairy. It took me until I was about 30 to actually get tested for allergies on my own, and the test revealed that I wasn't allergic to dairy. I had my first piece of pizza at 30, and I gained about 50 pounds in 6 months, making up for the lost time. That the president runs America. Mosquitoes only like female blood. I see how that one came about. Only female mosquitoes suck blood. What's the biggest sign for someone being out of touch with society? You feel depressed? You should take a year off and travel the world. It will cheer you up. They don't understand that even though they don't care if they smell as if they haven't showered in weeks, the people they interact with do care. I've got a coworker who doesn't shower more than once every 2 weeks, and I can always tell when she's in the office or where she's been in the office. No one says anything. In the interest of not coming back to a maxed out inbox every hour or so, we don't have an HR department because it's such a small business, and I don't think I could bring myself to tell her myself, no matter how passive-aggressively. Oh god, that must be horrible. Fortunately, she works on the next floor down, but one of the things my boss said when I started 2 years ago was, "Coworker doesn't have a sense of smell, so heads up." She does have a sense of smell because she talks about how much she loves the smell of coffee all the time. A former boss, an incredibly great guy, but also someone who has been worth upwards of 100 million since the time he was about 20, once spotted me cash for lunch, handed me 2 $100 bills and asked if that was enough. Treating people with low-level jobs like crap. Just get a job, like I did at your age. Just walk into the place and give the hiring manager your resume. They watch a lot of cable news programs. They actually believe insane things such as that we live in a more violent and scary time than previous generations. Hint, this is hands down the most peaceful time in human history, in basically every way you could possibly define it. I've had this actual conversation with colleagues. Colleague: burglaries are definitely going up. I can't think of anyone who doesn't know someone who has been burgled. Me: I don't know anyone, and burglaries have been on a steady decline for years now, just like every major crime stat. Colleague: that's just stats, man. People no longer report most crimes because they know the police won't solve them. Me: I don't know about you, but my home insurance requires a police report if I want to make a claim. So even if I don't expect to get my TV or PC back, I still need to report it to get the payout. Colleague: well, the fear of crime is definitely going up. Me: so what? I can honestly say I know that I'm out of touch with society when it comes to the workforce. I'm almost 30 and only have had 4 jobs. Every single one was through a family friend. I landscaped and did construction with no resume or application. Not even an interview. I was just told to show up. After college, I told a family friend what I studied, and they needed a person in that area of expertise at their small company. Again, I was just told to show up. They showed me the ropes, and now I have a real career with an important sounding job title. I know I'm lucky, and I also know this is not typical for most people. That's why my only advice to my friends is to network as much as they can. It's more about who you know than what you know when it comes to job searches. I was talking to an acquaintance who studied at the same business school as me. He was bragging that he got offered an internship at Deloitte because 1. His older brother worked there, and 2. He was able to network his way into an offer. The part that made me mad the most is that he got this offer before even starting the program. In other words, he had been accepted into the business school to study information systems but hadn't actually started yet, but somehow got an internship offer for the following year with Deloitte. Doesn't it piss anyone else off that it's about who you know more than how good you are? No one has to use the internet. Try finding a job, paying bills, booking a ticket, or even getting into college without the internet now. My dad, whose job would not exist without the internet, has said this in conversation. He was being 100% serious too. I think it's one of those technically correct points. Yes, I don't have to use the internet, ever. I mean, I wouldn't be employable or be able to function like a civilized person where I live, but I wouldn't outright die, like if I didn't have food and water and air. People who go for the technically correct points love being right, and don't notice that they don't get invited to parties. I was at a small conference in 2014, and one of the organizers was basically a real-life Ned Flanders, middle-aged but very boring and vanilla. Might have actually thought babies were delivered by storks, not midwives. At one point, he asked if everyone could write their email numbers on a piece of paper being passed around. Email numbers. In 2014. Best thing I ever heard. I had a consultant tell me we needed to focus on non-tech solutions. Like this whole tech craze was just going to blow over. We're a tech company. People who I know make 40 grand a year and have multiple kids, yet insist that they are middle class. Yes, you may have been raised middle class, and yes, you have a degree. But no, making 40 grand as a single parent with multiple kids means that you are probably 1 or 2 missed paychecks away from ruin. It's not to denigrate those people. There's nothing wrong with them. They just have been told that they are in a better position than they are, and probably want to believe that they are. This is why the poor seemingly vote against their own interests in some cases. People don't believe they're poor. I think the problem is that there is a stigma around being part of the working poor, so people don't want to get lumped in with the people that they think don't try as hard. When the reality is that being in that financial situation really tells you more about the state of our economy and job market. Complaining about how young people aren't independent enough and need to move out on their own sooner and get less help from their parents. These people act like ties to family and community resources are ruining young people. This view is out of touch with the large portion of the world's population in which young people don't leave their family's home until they are ready to be married and join a new family home. I'm the parent in this scenario, and it's been a real trip. When I was young, I did all those things. You're supposed to do college, grad school, married, buy a house, have kids, etc. And it worked out, mostly because it was a totally different era. My kids came from an age during the worst recession since the 1930s, and around the time I divorced their father, and he basically washed their hands of them, and it's been hard as hell on them. It's also hard for me to know how much to help them. It infuriates me when I hear people my age going on about millennials this and millennials that. Millennials didn't ruin the housing market and make Lehman Brothers fail and start expensive wars in the Middle East. Or when people go off about how the adults of today don't know how to do anything because they got all trophies just for participating. Who the hell do you think gave them the trophies? You don't have a job? You're not trying hard enough. Hit the pavement and hand out resumes, buddy. Oh, get a job? Just get a job? Why don't I strap on my job helmet and squeeze down into a job cannon and fire off into jobland where jobs grow in jobbies? A young 20-year-old once said to me, also 20, why don't you just have your parents pay for it? He wasn't trying to be a jerk. He genuinely thought everyone's parents would just buy them a $350 ski lift season pass. My small-town Canadian high school had a group of Nigerian students who were mostly from very wealthy families. One of the boys asked my friend to go to a party with him, and she declined because she had to work. He asked her, "Why do you work?" And she explained that she was responsible for buying her own clothes and things. And he very earnestly asked why her parents didn't just put more money on her credit cards. Nice enough guy, but money wasn't really a concept to him. Met a girl who graduated college with no student loans. Folks paid it all, and a very sizable savings account handed to her. But we were discussing nepotism, and I tried to explain to her that some wealthy people who got that way and were kind of handed a silver spoon, even though they worked hard, they were still privileged. My point was that we are all privileged, just to different extents. She would not and perhaps could not agree that she was privileged at all. Apparently everyone can have a brand new car, 2 jet skis, a speedboat, and 100 pairs of shoes at 25 years old if they just worked harder. My father is 80 years old, but he has been a pariah his whole life, although it's slightly more excusable now that he's elderly. He has spent his whole life alienating himself, even from his own children, and then blaming everyone but himself. And the reasons he comes up with are insane. You didn't want to be an engineer? You must be lazy and bad at math. Your brother married into a wealthy Jewish family? Guess I better become anti-Semitic. Do you have a tattoo? What a fad. And his whole life has been like that. He invents reasons why people don't like him, such as his old boss not liking him because he didn't like people who grew up on the farm. As a result, in his old age, he is single and rarely sees his kids and grandkids. We recently started planning a birthday celebration for him, which he promptly took over all of the planning for. It's going to be a disaster. Sounds like his parents criticized him right out of reality. Could be. He's very sensitive about his mother, and while he talks fondly of his father, I think he was an abusive alcoholic. One of my brothers, who is a doctor, thinks he's a narcissist, and that he never got the affection he needed from his mother. He's not an inherently bad man. He tries to help people, and he's very good with young children. He just turned into a monster when we hit our teens. Thankfully, Mom got us out of there, but my 3 older half-siblings were not so lucky. When they look at someone who works their ass off and see that they don't have a nice car or a house or anything and say, that person should have tried harder, or if the hard worker mentions benefits that would keep them fit for work, or heavens forbid, might just improve their quality of living, what a lazy socialist. When they see someone doing a non-office job and assume the person doesn't pay their own bills, like your pizza driver, don't tell him, but maybe you can get a coffee with it. LOL. I made more money doing pizza delivery than I do at my office job where I have to be licensed and take CE courses. It was far less stressful as well. Sounds like you're being underpaid at your current job. I clawed my way up from the very bottom with nothing but a laptop and an $8 million loan from my father. Reminds me of IT Crowd. When I started Rain Home Industries, all I had was a dream and £6 million. When someone screams about poor or homeless people having cell phones and says they need to be pounding the pavement for a job, like how do you expect them to apply, keep in touch with work, and get called for interviews? There are so many people out of touch with how technology-driven the world is now. I used to think that about homeless people. Why have a phone? Why not look for work? But yeah, that has changed now, and with everything being online, I can understand it more. Showing no empathy for other people. Also, anyone that can hurt a pet is someone that could easily hurt a human. There are some seriously sick people out there. They go on Reddit for relationship advice. Do you know why the default advice is to just break up already? Because if your relationship is so bad that you need to ask Reddit if your relationship is salvageable, it probably isn't. I don't know, 80% of the relationships in there are probably 100% salvageable. If they would just communicate with their partner. The number of people who simply never articulate a problem to their partner and break up is astronomical. The reason I don't have friends is because everyone knows I'm smarter than them and they're just jealous. Socially awkwardness does not equal intelligence. Too many people think it does. Here's one I experienced a few days ago. When faced with the issue of how Walmart doesn't pay their employees a living wage, this guy tells me, the thing is, they have the choice to work there or not. If they don't like working there, they can always go find a different job. I said to him, I don't know if that's true. I think for a lot of small towns, Walmart may be one of the biggest employers in their town. There might not be other job openings for things that they can do. They can work in a factory. I've always been able to find jobs when I didn't like one. And you have a good back with 2 working legs. No major injuries, no criminal record, no severe learning disability. Take away any one of those things, and you might not have such an easy time finding work in a factory. And a lot of the people I see working at Walmart have all of those things. At that point, I let him continue his rant. That was the point when I knew he was the kind of person to believe they can tell all about a person by looking at them without speaking to them. I don't know about you, but I can't always just look at a person and tell whether or not they have a health condition that would limit them from routinely lifting 50 pounds. I've talked to people who have worked at Walmart, and none of them liked it. Can't they just, stop being poor or something? Where are all these poor people I keep hearing about? I go to a lot of parties and I never meet any of them. I'm lucky the one wealthy friend I have is just completely sympathetic to the fact I just don't get money. He's never said, go get a job, when I've said I don't have something because he understood how low-paying they actually are for 16 to 18-year-olds. When we have D&D sessions, he pays for the food for all 5 to 6 of us. Sometimes I offer to pay some of it and he says no. I won't miss $30 anyway, but you would. If they start loudly and confidently making statements about politically divisive topics in a room of people looking for affirmative support without having accurately discerned their general stance on the subject, receiving a class on new transgender protection/policies in the workplace, in a room full of people who largely lean left on social issues, probably not the place to openly question the validity of the basis for someone identifying as transgender, or the need to have a policy for treating them appropriately at work. Look, if you're anxious, just take a breath and walk it off. And its partner, just stop being so depressed. Can't you just be happy? Oh my god, Allie, you're a miracle worker. I'm not sad anymore. I'm ready to take on the world because you said that. Being poor is a choice, and how easy it is to get out of being poor. First off, it's not always by choice. You can make a decent salary but barely have crap to show for it because of where you live. Then there are unexpected events with the expenses and debts, divorce, medical bills, etc., that'll eat away your income to try and pay those off. I've had my soaking broke days when a 99-cent taco from Taco Bell was considered a splurge. Getting out of being poor isn't easy. It takes loads of time, work, and personal sacrifices to do it. It takes loads of time, work, and personal sacrifices to do it. And luck. So much darn luck. When you aren't poor, you have a buffer zone that prevents small mess-ups from cascading into big problems. Example 1, I leave my Metro card at home and don't realize it until I get to the station. I can either just buy another one, or if I really wanted to go home and get it and be late because I'm salaried and nobody watches the clock. A poor person in a crappy job, they don't have the extra money for a new card. And if they are 5 minutes late, they get fired. You millennials and your participation trophies. Yeah, thanks, Mom. You wanted that so you wouldn't feel bad about having an average kid. Don't look at me like I'm at fault for those. Real communism hasn't been tried yet. If you want to play that card, that's fine, but neither has real capitalism by that logic. Actually, real communism has been tried a lot. It works really well for small groups, particularly non-industrialized cultures with no real property rights issue. It is once you get layers between those who catch the fish and those who assign jobs that things really break down. Someone constantly trying to outsource their own problems. Whether it's the government, the corporations, or society, they've always got a problem with it. Not saying there aren't serious issues with the world, but it's probably not the man keeping you down. I had a roommate like this. Nothing was ever her fault. It was her ex's fault, or the landlord's fault, or the neighbor's fault, except it was actually all her fault. Wealth. This isn't meant as a declaration of class warfare or anything, but the wealthy are often insulated from many of the day-to-day activities and problems that make the common man what he is. The ever-present needs of a roof over your head, food on the table, good education for your children, reliable transportation, medical care, etc. These are struggles that are so fundamental for the low and middle class that most of their lives are spent attending to them. This also isn't to say that the wealthy don't work hard, or that they don't have struggles of their own. It's just that they're not the same. If I'm in the top 5% of income, there is very little chance, even in a crisis, of my family going hungry, becoming homeless, or not being able to access good health care. Those worries are essentially never on my mind. Personally, I'm very fortunate to have a pretty high-paying job and enough financial security to get through most situations. However, recently my furnace broke, and when I couldn't instantly fix it, my laziness crept in and I let it go. Hey, it won't be cold for long, right? Wrong. It was about 3 weeks, and let me tell you, my mood, outlook, and basically everything is directly affected by my comfort level. Being cold all the time crept into my psyche and made me anxious and borderline paranoid. To combat the situation, I wore coats inside and generally had blankets in all situations. But what about getting up at night to go to the bathroom? Little things like that become an ordeal. And it wasn't even that cold. The temperature in my house was in the high 50s and low 60s. I wasn't suffering at all in reality, but psychologically my comfort was getting crushed. My life was noticeably worse, over basically nothing. Eventually it buckled down and fixed the furnace. The temperature was up to where I keep it normally, about 68, in a few minutes. I could feel my anxiety and dread melt away as I sat on my couch and heard the furnace pumping heat. It is amazing how the mind and body subconsciously prod you when needs are not being met to their satisfaction. Basic needs are powerful. Car salespeople paying attention only to the male if a couple goes in looking for a car, or asking if a woman's husband or father is okay with her trading in their vehicle, or steering a chick away from trucks and towards sedans. Women buy cars on their own, and being sexist is a good way to lose a sale. I've had so much fun with this when I was married many years ago. She could fix any car, identify any car by its taillights, and negotiate like a boss. When we'd go in to get a car, I'd take all the test drives and look at the cool cars while she would do the research on the vehicles and compare prices pre-internet. The look on the face of the salesperson after spending half a day with me, and she wants to negotiate a completely different car sale. Well, that look was priceless. They've just been released from maximum security prison. That reminds me of Brooks from The Shawshank Redemption. I can't believe how fast things move on the outside. I saw an automobile once when I was a kid, but now they're everywhere. The world got itself in a big damn hurry. My grandma complains about Aboriginal people being lazy and that they're all uneducated because they didn't finish high school. My grandma didn't finish high school, and neither did one of her children. Living in a dilapidated mobile home but have a brand new car and a 75-inch big screen TV. While I agree, I wonder if it's really a matter of opinion regarding what's important to the individual. I worked with a guy whose house was infested with rats and ants. The foundation wasn't sound. There was a noticeable dip in the floor on the second level, and his landlord didn't care. He had all of the latest video game consoles and accessories, a 4K TV, expensive aftermarket radios, and speakers for his car, which had bald tires and the dash perpetually lit up. Now, if it were me, I would have spent the money he spent on games and electronics on finding a better house and fixing up my car. And while that seems like the responsible thing to do, at the end of the day, he's perfectly content with a crappy house and a rundown car. He bought the things he wanted, so he's happy. Is he right? I guess it depends. I want to say he isn't, but if he's happy, who gives a crap? I have a 50-inch 4K TV. It costs $300. It's not exactly the mega luxury it once was. My taxes just go to the obese person eating at a McDonald's with health issues. From the guy who doesn't work, pays no taxes, married to a woman who does work, pays all the taxes, and conveniently forgets that taxes go to a whole slew of important things. But don't worry, see, he doesn't need health insurance because he has homeopathy. We won't need to worry about that one much longer. Thinking that, as a kid, getting your maids and servants to be customers at your lemonade stand because you set it up in your dad's big, gaudy tower is making the best of a bad situation. When everyone else is wrong, no matter what the subject or topic is, and they're always right. I was traveling in India and ran across another pair of Americans and decided to spend the day touring the city. After a while, it became apparent that the guy was a bit of an ass. Eventually, after we passed a beggar, he said to me, "It's amazing how you treat everyone with respect." I said, "What? You're nice to everyone." Apparently, just saying sorry and nodding was enough to gain some amazement from this guy. In the US, I call everyone sir, even homeless men, or ma'am for women. Anyways, lo and behold, about an hour later, some boy comes up to us near the train station and begs, mentioning hand to mouth, hand to mouth. Many of these are part of a cultural group that in the West may or may not be homeless, but what they are not is 1. Wealthy, 2. Healthy, and 3. Educated. I nod and walk past, engaging just attaches them to you for a few blocks. My fine new American friend begins a lecture about how they should go to school. They are 8 and 10 years old, maybe. As expected, the boy begins to follow. About a minute later, the American begins to scream at the boy at the top of his lungs. "Go to school! Go to school! Go to school!" Me and my wife just noped out of there as fast as we could. What the hell, man? Wherever you are, what the hell was that? I'm not very tech-savvy. It's been 35 years since the introduction of personal computers. The Apple IIe was built 3 years before I was born, and they've only gotten more affordable since then. "I'm not very tech savvy" is the secret code for "I am not willing to use my time to learn about computers, and I'm going to get angry if you make me try to learn, or if I don't immediately understand." This is just all going to be about rich people, isn't it? Probably, although I can give an alternate version: people who are too lazy to hold down a job and blame it on corporate greed. It's not the man's fault that you got fired from Old Navy. It's your fault for being on your phone 24/7 and getting pissy at actually having to work. Taxes are theft. Nope, they are not. They are flawed, but we don't have anything to replace them either. No one wants to pay more taxes, so I'm always open to actual solutions. None have arrived so far when asked, only, "It will work, trust me," after the usual roads/military/charity debate. People who eschew pop culture and then play AAA video games. I was looking for work and my dad told me about a job that you need a lot of experience for. I told him I had no experience and he said that wouldn't stop me. Yeah, but it would, Dad. My mom just shared this story with me. She was sitting at a picnic table outside of a dormitory at the University of South Alabama when a dude came up to her and asked if she wanted to talk about religion. He asked if she believed in Jesus and she said no. He said, "What if I told you all the fossils were fake?" My mom noped out of there fast. Back in my day, why do young people? I hate this generation. What's the deal with these insert new technology? Need a job? You just need to go out and pound the pavement like I did. Kids these days are on their phones too much, and it's making them antisocial. Actually, I'm catching up with my friends who are halfway around the world, thanks. Also, people who still send Christmas cards, especially to people they haven't seen in 20 years. Hey, I like Christmas cards. It's an awesome way to have minimal contact with old friends and distant relatives without them falling off the radar entirely. No cell phone tends to be a pretty good indicator. If the only way to get a hold of you is at your house, you're about 20 years behind the rest of society, technologically speaking. They think Reddit is an accurate picture of society. People think that racism or racial discrimination doesn't exist anymore. The internet is changing the way we live, work, and play. As a 27-year-old, how is that incorrect or out of touch? Is it considered dated because it already has happened? I don't get your point. I met a homeschooling family who didn't allow their kids to know about any crises, violence, or attack in America. The 17-year-old had never heard about the 9/11 terrorist attack. Posting this on my alt because the guy knows my main Reddit account. A guy I know legitimately asked if it was socially acceptable to have his anime figures prominently visible during a job interview over Skype. I was giving a tour of a locomotive repair facility and ran into a mechanic who had grease on his hands and overalls. One of my tour attendees, a woman in her 60s, said, "I could never do that job. I hate getting dirty. I hate sweating too. Whenever I go to the gym, I walk on the treadmill until I start sweating and then I stop and go home." Saw a man with a pager the other day. Someone trying to attack from the lower ground. Their names generally are prefixed by Senator. People not knowing the prices of things, especially groceries, often indicate they are rich and order food a lot, or have people make their food rather than making it themselves. I knew someone who thought cooking a pasta meal for a group of people would cost $15 a head. Dated a UCLA medical student who asked me what ISIS was. This was in 2015. She had never even heard of the term before. She's now going to be an ophthalmology resident at the #1 ranked ophthalmology program in the country. Writing checks at the grocery store. People who don't believe in climate change.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.